Is it time to reimagine your future? The right business skills may make a difference in your career. At Capella University, we offer a relevant education that's designed to focus on what you need to know in the business world. We'll teach professional skills to help you pursue your goals, like business management, strategic planning, and effective communication. And you can apply these skills right away. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
'Tis the season of gifting and halls to deck, and the who's and who Newville were in love with new tech. Where can we find Sonos and Samsung and Nintendo, they shouted. Would they find it in one place? This they questioned and doubted. When suddenly a who yelled, Walmart's the place to start! And each who added headphones, TVs, and games to their carts. With Walmart, their shopping was done in a flurry. They cried out, who knew? And ordered their gifts in a hurry. Shop the latest tech gifts in the Walmart app.
And warmer from the low, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Matt Josephs. You know him better as Mid-Major Matt. He does a great job with Ariel Epstein's Prop Queen website, along with podcasts. He does great work over at ESPN Radio in Richmond. He's going to be joining me about what we've all seen here in the first 3 weeks of the season. I know that he's out there in the state of Virginia, so we're going to ask about a few of those teams, certainly the Cavaliers, who are going to be playing here on Sunday. And we're also going to be taking a look at just the sample size we have in general. How much / little do we make out of it? Is there some good times to be able to find a little bit of progression / regression with hot and cold three-point shooting teams? And then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we eat some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter / X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, LRCM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Well, I did not get in any Twitter / X questions. Everything is powered by Better. That is BETR on Better. Better is making it easier than ever before to be able to jump in on some daily fantasy, because all you need to do is go to BETR.app and type in the promo code of VSINPOD, VSINPOD. That gets you $10 free. You just pick the player that you want to bet on with regards to his stats, going over or under, and boom, you're all good to go. And we're all good to go to take a look at what was a fun college basketball Saturday. Let's take a look back, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
A nice win for the Dons of San Francisco. They, at the Sanford Pentagon, take it to Minnesota by a count of 77-65 as they go 11 of 22 from 3. Ryan Beasley, he was able to supply the team with 24 points. Minnesota is much improved from a season ago, but still a work in progress. Kate Tyson was able to give the team 14 points, but boy, did they shoot themselves in the foot. How about 15 of 30 at the free throw line? They lose the turnover battle. Minnesota does as well, 12-11. So a very nice quality win for San Francisco, as they also won the rebound battle 33-27. Only one ranked team in action, and Long Island, well, they were on the receiving end of a butt kicking. Illinois 98-58 winners, and for the Illinois defense, they were very rock solid in this one. As for Long Island, 17 turnovers. For Illinois, they're still dealing with the injury to Mr. Tomislav Ivicic. He played just 21 minutes, 9 points, 4 rebounds, whole performance, but they didn't need him too much in this one with how big of a blowout it was. Andrei Stojakovic, he was able to supply the team with 20 points, and for Illinois, they only go 5 of 16 from 3-point, but they absolutely win that battle down low, winning the rebound battle 40-22, so a nice showing out there. Georgetown, they don't get the cover against Wagner, but they do get a 92-75 win, scoring 92 points on Wagner, very out of the ordinary, to say the least, and Malik Mack was the Mack attack. He was able to give the team 18 points, 5 assists, and for Wagner, they do go 9 of 25 from 3-point range. They also lost the turnover battle 16-11, but nice quality cover there for old Wagner, and this was nice and quality as well. How about getting the job done? Fairfield on the road against Lemoyne, 97-83, the final in that one. As Lemoyne, I mean, they're a team that has been pretty rock solid. They played relatively close against Xavier, but I like what I'm seeing out of this Fairfield team as well, so they're going to be an interesting team moving forward. It's going to be interesting to see what we get out of Oklahoma State moving forward, as they get the win, but no cover against Nichols, 95-81, the final, as got 97 points in the second half in this one, as Oklahoma State 8 of 25 from 3, but they did turn the ball over quite a bit. They actually won the turnover battle 16-15, but a little bit sloppy there, and what really uplifted Oklahoma State in this one, they go 25 of 27 at the free throw line as Jalen Curry, 12 of 12 at the charity stripe, 30 points, 10 assists off the bench, so he did a nice job there. And hey, Jalen Dirkley, he for Nichols was able to keep them lively. He was able to score in double figures, and UMass lost to a team coached by a radio show host. UW Green Bay, they get the 79-75 win, and for UW Green Bay, they go just 3 of 13 from three-point range, but 28 of 35 at the free throw line. UMass does win the rebound battle, 30-24, but UMass had a really rough go of it from three-point range last season, just 7 of 26 here in this one. Marcus Banks does go 4 of 12 from 3, but the rest of the team, 3 of 14 from three-point range, so not necessarily what they were looking for there. And Maryland Eastern Shore has actually been quite a feisty team. They take down Binghamton 63-52 as Maryland Eastern Shore currently dead last in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but this Binghamton team has not been a whole lot better themselves, and they had 16 turnovers in this game. Jeremiah Quigley, how about him going for 9 points and 8 turnovers? That is not really going to be helping out the cause. This is going to help out your cause. So as for this Northern Colorado bunch, they go on the road, they get the job done against Portland by a count of 86-80, and yeah, Quinn Danker really go off in this one, 29 points, he was able to supply 7 assists. Northern Colorado always one of the better teams on the defensive glass as well. This was a closing spread of right around 3.5, so Northern Colorado does find a way to be able to get the job done. And then the earlier game out there in Portland, pretty big upset as for St. Thomas, the Tommies, they just did not have it in this game against Cal State Fullerton, 88-80 the final. As for the Tommies, they had Noah Minsale be able to supply the team with 26 points, but just needed a little bit more around them. As for the Tommies, they go 8 of 33 from 3, and for Cal State Fullerton, 23 of 25 at the free throw line, and they did a solid job in the turnover department. They only lose that battle by kind of 10-9 as Joshua Ward was able to supply that team with 20 points. So they do find a way to persevere, get the job done out there. For Dayton, it looked like they were going to get a nice cover against NC Central as a very sizable favorite, but NC Central actually wins the second half in this game, 35-30. So NC Central is a 29.5 point dog. They cover against Dayton, 74-55. The final. NC Central certainly a work in progress on offense, but they do go 6 of 14 from 3-point range. They lose the turnover battle, 18-11, and for Dayton, Deshaun Montgomery, 17 big points in this one, but nice quality cover there as we did see a lot of the bigger underdogs be able to find a way to be able to get to the window, and that was not the case for Cleveland State. 91-71, they fall to Kent State. Kent State has really been able to shoot it much better from 3-point range this season, 18 out of 42 from 3-point range, and for Cleveland State, defense has been pretty non-existent for them thus far this season. And for Marquette, they get the win but no cover against Central Michigan, 85-71, the final for Central Michigan, just 5 of 18 from 3-point range, but held in there on the glass, played even up there, 36-36. Chase Ross was able to supply 27 points to uplift this Marquette team as he was able to be a rock-solid 7-8 from the floor, 12-14 at the free throw line, but for Marquette, they did a solid job in terms of not turning it over themselves, but didn't generate as many turnovers as you'd like to see. Just 11 turnovers committed on Central Michigan, so that was a rock-solid performance for the Chippewas to be able to get that cover. And for Providence, they take it to Penn State, 77-65 the final. Penn State playing a much slower style, by the way, outside the top 250 now in terms of total possessions per game. It's been a Penn State team that's taking care of the ball. 11 turnovers is now a season high for them, but for Providence, reason why they got the job done, you were able to get down low. Oswin, I can't say his last name, to give you 4 blocks, 8 rebounds, 11 points. As for this Providence team, they win the rebound battle 45-43. They also turn the ball over just 7 times. Jalen Sellers, along with Jason Edwards, they combine for 27 points, and Providence wins this game despite going just 6 of 33 from 3-point range. Imagine what that could have been had they been firing all cylinders. And Mississippi Valley State holds in there against Cal State Bakersfield. They actually outscored Bakersfield in the second half, 48-47. 3 straight covers for the Delta Devils, 86-70 the final. As for the Delta Devils, they only go 2 of 10 from 3-point range, but a Bakersfield team that lost their coach just before the start of the season, Rod Barnes, with that whole situation. That was not great to say the least. And for this Bakersfield team, they played relatively even up with regards to turnover department. Mississippi Valley State loses that by kind of 12-10, but still for Mississippi Valley State, nice solid performance there. So you like to see some of these teams that are a little bit lesser being able to rise up, and we saw Northeastern as an underdog be able to rise up 93-86. They were able to take down Duquesne as you had Xavier Abreu, a true freshman, step up. He supplied that team with over 30 points, so nice rock solid win there. Do have to have this up before midnight Pacific, 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern, so I am unsure of how this overtime game between Northern Iowa and UC Irvine went. Zots out for the Anteaters. Right now, this is has been a game where we have seen 2 points in the overtime session in the first 3 minutes, with Northern Iowa up 65-63. So we shall see how that one materializes. And this game played multiple overtimes, but it was Iona getting it done over Oregon State, 91-84 the final. Iona has been one of the best three-point shooting defenses in all of college basketball, and they limited Oregon State to going just 7 of 23 from three-point range. And how about for Iona? C.J. Anthony, the transfer from Cincinnati, 22 points, 4 assists for Iona. They won the turnover battle 15-13, and for Oregon State, nobody to blame but themselves for losing this one. 21 out of 36 at the free throw line. It's just simply not going to cut it. This isn't going to cut it, though. Indiana State, they were able to go on a nice run against Ball State, and we saw a lot of underdogs that had control of their games early, just really let go of the rope. 70-52, Indiana State takes it to Ball State. Ball State just 4 of 20 from three-point range. They play even up in the turnover department, and Marcus Harding was able to really uplift this Indiana State team. He goes 7-10 from the floor, 15 points, as Ball State was up in the second half of this game, and then they got outscored, I believe, 35-15 in the final 12 or so minutes of that game. You had the same for UW-Milwaukee. They actually held the lead over Wichita State in the second half, and then they let go of the rope, 75-58 the final in this one. As for UW-Milwaukee, they lose the rebound battle by kind of 45-36, and for Milwaukee, just 6 of 23 from three-point. Wichita State much improved from three thanks to Keenan Giles. He supplies the team with 24 points, goes 4 of 7 from the outside, and for UW-Milwaukee, they just really didn't have that go-to guy. Daniil Janovic was able to supply the team with 12 points, but that was about it. So Milwaukee relatively held down there, and then you saw Howard in the second half be able to power pass Niagara. Niagara was up 37-29 at the half. Howard 51-33. They outscored Niagara in the second half for an 80-70 win, and Bryce Harris, one of the better players in all of college basketball that doesn't get talked about. 20 points, 5 boards. He was able to supply the team with a steal as well, so he powers that team to victory. That was a nice quality win for them, and this was also a nice quality win. As for Chattanooga, they powered themselves over North Alabama, 71-57 the final. Chattanooga, not quite the same three-point shooting team as they were a season ago, 11 of 33 from the outside, but Billy the Kid Smith was able to give you 18 points, and North Alabama has been covering a lot of spreads, but when you go 9-17 at the free throw line, that's going to impact you a little bit. And then Nevada, nice win over UC Santa Barbara, 77-64 final in that one, as Corey Camper was able to spy 27 points out in that one. And then High Point, not a low point, 91-80. They were able to take down Incarnate Word. As for High Point, they closed in this game more around about 12 to 12.5 point favorite, so unable to cover that number, but still looking like a really good mid-major with scary Terry Anderson, who was able to supply the team with 23 points. He had 12 rebounds out of Cameron Fletcher, guy that began his career over at Xavier and Florida State, and just a really efficient high-point team. They don't necessarily play up-tempo, but only 8 turnovers in this game, and Incarnate Word actually one of the slower teams in all of college basketball, but pretty efficient on offense, not so efficient on the defensive side of things. And if you're looking trend-wise at what we're getting in college basketball right now, we have now seen the under have a little bit of a tough time of it over the last few days, but after it was very overwhelming, it's much more even up right now with the Northern Iowa versus UC Irvine game pending for the season. Overs are hitting at about 50.3%, 433 overs, 428 unders, and right now the underdogs hitting at about 51% against the spread, 436, 421, and 11 against the spread after the favorites had a really nice go of it in the first few days of the season. And if you're looking at just what we saw on Saturday we did see quite a few games get overwhelming. 22 overs, 15 unders with that UC Irvine game pending, and then the favorites went just 15 and 22 on the money line. So that's where we're seeing trend-wise, and that's what we're getting in college basketball right now. Coming up next, how about if we do chat with one of our good friends, Matt Josephs, aka Mid-Major Matt, about what we've all seen here in the first few weeks of the season, look at Sunday, and how he's handicapping a lot of these neutral court tournaments as well. That's up next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Gibbs Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast.
The Who's Down in Who Newville were making their list, but some didn't know Walmart has the best brands for their gifts.
What about toys? Do they have brands kids have been wanting all year?
Yep, Barbie, Tony's, and Lego. Gifts that will make them all cheer.
Do you mean they have all the brands I adore?
They have Nintendo, Nespresso, Apple, and more.
What about...
So the Who answered questions from friends till they were blue. Each one listened and shouted, from Walmart? Who knew? Shop gifts from top brands for everyone on your list in the Walmart app.
Are you looking to get an inside edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And it's always great to be joined by this man, as we've got our good friend Matt Josephs, aka Major Matt, aboard. He does great work over at the Prop Queen website and the Prop Queen podcast as well. He's over there at ESPN Radio in Richmond, doing a tremendous job with the show Border to Border. And take a look at all the college teams out there in the great state of Virginia. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at his name, Major Matt, all together. And Matt, it's always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Thank you as always for having me.
Always good to have you aboard. And Matt, we now have about 3 weeks worth of data after Sunday on these teams. And just what have you really been able to decipher from this college basketball season? Because I do think that non-conference play has been interesting, and it's been a really interesting dynamic in the way that favorites and overs reign so supreme early, and we've almost seen an overcorrection here in the last week or two.
Yeah, I've noticed some really high totals. I mean, that's for sure. We've seen a lot more 180s than I've seen, in a long time. When we look at, obviously with IU Indianapolis, what they're doing in terms of playing college basketball a little bit differently, I've noticed at least early on, there's just been a lot of higher totals so far, a lot more scoring. I think that will calm down a little bit, especially once we get towards conference play and more of the tougher games of the season. But I think it's a lot of teams just trying to figure out their styles of play and figures out, how they want to attack the opposition, whether it's by the three-pointer or by, being a slower, more methodical team that's really efficient on offense.
Yep, and I do think that it is going to be interesting to take a look at the way that these teams just meld each other. And with regards to what you've been seeing thus far, are we starting to get to a point where we've got enough data to be able to make something out of these teams, or do you want to see a little bit more? Because something that I find myself doing a lot of this year is looking at these teams that shoot 45+% from three-point range in the first 5 games and banking on a little bit of regression, and vice versa, the teams that come out super-duper cold, thinking that there's going to be a little bit of a bounce back.
Well, I also need to see the opposition. I mean, some teams have faulty 5-0 records, 6-0 records. They've played a bunch of nobodies and they look very good against them. And so, you want to see what they do against legitimate opponents, or if they're a type of team that hasn't left their building or things like that. You want to maybe get a data point or two for them on the road or in a neutral site. So, yeah, I think in certain situations, 5-6 games is pretty good, at least so far. But I feel like there's a lot of teams who have not left home. There's a lot of teams who have not played anybody good. And so because of that, I feel like we need a few more data points in those situations.
And with a lot of those teams, they are going to be playing for the first time away from home here this week, as Matt Josephs, aka Major Matt, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, because we do have a lot of these tournaments out there in far, far away places like the Bahamas. I know that there's a few that go on in Cancun, and then you get the random tournaments, and I know that they had a multi-team event in Portland this week over at the campus of the Portland Pilots, Pensacola, Florida, what have you. How do you take a look at these tournaments? Because I do think that we get some wackadoo results, and sometimes it's a coming out party like we saw for Florida last year, and sometimes we have some of these teams win a multi-team event tournament, and it's wow, they finished below 500 after that.
At least early on, you're looking for more veteran teams because you mentioned it. For some of these tournaments, you're going out to the Bahamas. Your first inclination, your first thought is, oh my God, I'm in the Bahamas. I want to go and sit at the beach and relax and, enjoy the sun and everything. And I think some of the younger teams treat it more as a vacation than some of the older teams do. So that's something I'm always looking at. Plus, you always want to look at the times. I mean, I'm looking at Monday's schedule. There's a couple of 11 a.m. games. How are these teams going to play at 11 a.m. in an empty gymnasium? gymnasium. Once again, I lean more towards the veteran teams who have probably done it before, or I lean to the teams who are not reliant as much on the 3-point shot because, it might be a little bit tougher in an emptier gymnasium in the middle of nowhere at 11 a.m. So I think in each individual case, you take a look at what a team does to score and how good their defense is and how they might handle a really random situation where they're playing at 1 a.m. or 11 a.m. in some gymnasium in the middle of nowhere.
Yep, absolutely. You get some very, very empty gyms, and you get some very intimate settings as well. And is that something you take a look at this time of year as well, the specific venue? Because I've just noticed over the last few years, like the battle for Atlantis, if you don't hit nothing but net in terms of some of those shots, it never goes in after it goes off the rims. Meanwhile, we've got the Maui Invitational that's going to be coming up. They have some of the most friendly rims I've ever seen. Like any ball that's even close to the rim, it seems like goes in. Is that something that it factors in a little bit as well this time of year?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, yeah, as you just mentioned, Maui, I feel like you just get it on the rim and it just kind of goes in, even if you hit the back of the rim or if you hit the left side of the rim. It's so soft when it comes to that sort of thing. And I don't think they care about that reputation. I think, Maui's like, oh, this is great. We get a lot of high scoring games. This is why teams want to go play here. I feel like we're still trying to collect some data points on the Players Era Championship. There is the NIL component to it. So there is some money situation there. So you might get teams playing a little bit differently in that situation. But I love overs in Maui. That's something I've been playing for quite a while.
Absolutely. It's always fun to see all these shots just randomly go in and you get those high-scoring exposés. It makes for a good time. As Matt Josephs, a.k.a. Mid-Major Matt, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Matt, I mentioned at the top, you're based out there in the great state of Virginia, and we are going to be seeing the Virginia Cavaliers in action on Sunday. And this is a pretty high total, in my opinion. We talked about the totals being high, and it feels like it's got a little bit too high here in this Butler game. Right now, about 154.5 to 155, which it actually opened up at 158.5. It is going downward as we do this show. But that said, how do you take a look at this Virginia team? Because I am noticing high totals in their games, and I mean, rightfully so with regards to the offense being rock solid, but I've been actually more impressed by the defense than anything else.
And this is a Virginia team that, although the last two games they've given up 78 points and, they played three lesser teams and played pretty well defensively, I think the thing we have to get used to is that there are going to be games where the defense doesn't show up. That was a rarity under Tony Bennett. There was always going to be a 50-something or 60-something point allowed from that team. And so we have to kind of get used to the fact that there will be more points scored in the Virginia game. Now, I do find it interesting that the tempo hasn't necessarily been the greatest, although the last two games they've started playing a little bit faster. And I feel like Ryan Odom will play a little bit faster once he has the chemistry he needs from his roster. I feel like this is an early situation where he's like, all right, we're going to make sure to run our offense and get the best shot that we possibly can. And then once we kind of figure out what plays work and what doesn't, we're going to go a lot faster. Butler goes pretty fast. I mean, look at some of their games so far. Now, some of it's inflated because they played that Indianapolis team that was a 90-possession game, so that's going to inflate things a little bit. The interesting thing for this matchup is both teams are really good at offensive rebounding. Now, you have to weigh that against some of the early competition and how much they got offensive rebounds against bad teams, but both of these teams feel like if they do miss shots, they're going to get the offensive rebound.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that that's something to be very much factoring in as well. And with Virginia, I think that this is a great question for you as well. How much have we noticed these international guys coming in and making an immediate impact? Because as we know, Virginia has a pair of big men that come in from overseas. They made a good impact. I look at a team like Virginia Tech with Nicolas Avadeus being rock solid. And I do feel like the wave of international guys coming in and making an immediate impact is more prevalent now than ever before.
Yeah, and you just mentioned it. Neo is so good for Virginia Tech, and he's a guy that's going to help you out in all sorts of different directions. If he's not scoring points, he's getting assists, he's blocking shots, he's getting rebounds and stuff like that. So I think he's a guy that, considering he was in the mix to be in the NBA draft, and then he pulled his name out and went to Virginia Tech. Like, that's the crazy part of this whole thing. He didn't go to like a North Carolina, Kansas, or anything like that. He went to Virginia Tech, which I think is great for the Hokies here. But yeah, and then you look on that team too. It's ironic how Virginia has two guys from overseas, and so does Virginia Tech, because you have Antonio Dorn, who's a 7-footer from Germany. So I think it's funny how you've got this rivalry between Tech and UVA, and both of them have added two international players to their roster.
Yep, and we've been seeing that really across the entire ACC as well. Lots of international guys coming in and making an immediate impact, as we do have Matt Josephs, aka Major Matt, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and certainly that Virginia game is going to be a lot of fun. And I know you were talking about this coming into the season with regards to Sunbelt, and perhaps there's going to be quite a few teams that are going to be playing unders there. What have you made out of these Sunbelt teams thus far this season? Because Troy has just had their numbers completely warped by the fact that they play a double overtime game against San Diego State. They play a triple overtime game against USC. They've probably been the most entertaining team in all of college basketball, but have been a little bit disappointed by an Old Dominion team that we're going to be seeing on Sunday. I know that obviously Louisiana Monroe, along with Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns, you knew that it was going to be a little bit rough for them having coaching changes in the offseason, but feels like it's been very much a mixed bag for that conference, and I'm very curious to see what we get out of these teams moving forward.
Yeah, 3 top 35 tempos and 4 in the 300s. And I mean, that's what it's going to be. And then it comes down to, are you a person who believes in the home team always dictates tempo, especially when we get the conference play? Or are there some teams who just make everybody play their tempo? And you mentioned the Sun Belt, and we talked about JMU, and I thought under Preston Spradlin that this was going to be a very defensive-based team, and so far that has not been the case. But I'll say I'm pleasantly surprised with the offense because they've scored 81, 79, 72, 84 so far. Like, they're starting to score some points on a team that I didn't know necessarily where the points were coming from. The problem is they're giving up a ton of points too. So I feel like that's something that if you watch Preston Spradlin teams, they suddenly figure it out come like December and January. And I think he'll get it to the tempo he wants. And I think he'll get it to the defense he wants. He's still kind of learning things. And on Monday, they're playing a game at FIU that I think FIU is going to want to run a little bit. And their defense is brutal too, although they've played a couple of higher level teams in Nebraska and LSU. But that'll be an interesting game on Monday, seeing JMU travel to FIU, especially since they lost at LIU last week in a higher scoring game.
Yep, absolutely. And those are going to be teams that are going to be a lot of fun to be able to gauge moving forward. And certainly with regards to what we're seeing in college basketball right now, we've got a lot of, shall we say, interesting matchups that are going to be happening on Sunday. And we do have out there a little bit closer to your neck of the woods, the Charleston Classic. And what do you make of the games that we're going to be seeing there on Sunday? Because I thought that we got some great fodder with regards to the games that we did see on Friday. You've got Clemson versus Georgia, the Utah State versus Davidson games. And I do think that we're going to be seeing some teams that are going to be able to make an impact on the college basketball landscape playing on Sunday. Even a team like a West Virginia, who I know that they lost that game against Clemson, but I've been feeling pretty bullish about what I've been seeing out of them this year.
Yeah, I really like Gerard Calhoun. I think what he's doing at Utah State is tremendous, and he's doing it with a mixture of guys that he had last year, and then bringing in a guy like MJ Collins. He was at Virginia Tech and he was at Vanderbilt. This is a team that has already beaten VCU on a neutral court. They beat Tulane on a neutral court, and like, their offense is very explosive. They're shooting 61% from 2. They're getting to the free throw line too, and that's two of the things that I think are really good when you're playing on a neutral court. They're not going to have a lot of fans. I mean, there's not a lot of Utah State fans who are traveling to Charleston, South Carolina, lovely city, but I just don't think a lot of them are traveling unless they're tying in a Thanksgiving, stay there and just kind of enjoying the city for the whole week. But they're kind of going into an atmosphere that it'll be a slight road game. I'm sure there'll be some Davidson fans there for this game. And look, I think Davidson's changing a little bit because they're a very slow team. We saw them play a 58 possession game against Boston College. It's their second 58 possession game of the season because they played Charlotte on the road as a 58 possession. So this will be interesting to see. Can Utah State speed Davidson up a little bit? Can they make them play at their pace? Or is Matt McKillop going to make this thing a very slow pace game in which that's, I think, the only way they have a chance because their offense is nowhere near as good as Utah State's. I do like Parker Fredrickson. He comes over from Wake Forest, but I don't think this is a Davidson offense that if this game starts getting into the high 60s, low 70s, I don't think they're going to be able to do it. So this will be a great case of which tempo wins out in Charleston. Usually I would lean more towards the veteran team of the two of them because they'll be playing in a situation that they're familiar with as opposed to the other one who may not be.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that that's going to be a fun one to take a look at for Sunday. And any other games really catching your attention in terms of the slate for Sunday, because we've got a mid-sized board. We've got a little bit over 30 games, so some nice selections out there. Anything else that's really standing out to you?
I like what Norfolk State has done so far this season. I mean, granted, they're 3-3, and most of the wins are coming against the lower level, but you lose at home by 3 to William & Mary. You lose by 3 at Old Dominion. You lose by 10 at Towson. This is a program that I talk about often on my radio show here because I love what Robert Jones has done. done. Now, granted, their offensive numbers are pretty bad. I mean, they're shooting 54.5% from the free throw line, which is why some of these close games could be going in their direction. But you're playing against a Wyoming team that, I don't love this Wyoming team, to say the least. The one thing Wyoming does is foul and send teams to the free throw lines, but that may not help Norfolk State very much in this sort of situation. But I'll be interested to see what Norfolk State does because this is a very long road trip for them. They have never been afraid of playing teams away from home. I believe last year they had a trip. Last year they went to Stanford and they went to Grand Canyon and UC Davis. So they basically spent a week out in California. They're never afraid of that sort of thing. So I think there's a chance that Norfolk State can keep that thing close. I don't know what you have in terms of your line there. And of course, the other team that I'm kind of interested in, I'm pleased with what I've seen so far, is George Washington. George Washington has done very well so far this season, but this is a team that, hasn't been tested too much so far. The win over South Florida was a good one on a neutral court. But other than that, they've taken care of business, and I'm really pleased to see their defense so far. I'm glad to see that they've got some offense so far. They've had some, injuries. They didn't have Garrett Johnson for 2 of their games. Trey Autry missed a game, so they're, trying to round back into form with a 100% roster here. But if they can come out of this tournament and they Cayman Islands even 2-1, maybe, I'll be very pleased with their thought. Now, I don't think this team's getting an at-large bid unless they beat Florida potentially in that game on December 13th in Sunrise, Florida, which will be a quote-unquote neutral game. And I'm doing the quotes with my hands right now, even though we're not on video. But I want to see what this Revolutionaries team does, because I still maintain they are the sleeper in that conference, and playing in a tournament like this and playing in 3 straight days against some good mid-major competition, I think this will tell us a lot about the Revs.
Yep, it certainly will. And with this George Washington team, they're a team that I picked going into the season to be able to win the Atlantic 10. I have been very impressed by them, so I am very much looking forward to seeing what they're going to be able to do moving forward. And they've already got some pretty rock-solid wins on their resume. Taking down South Florida was something that very much spoke to me, and I know you, Matt, are doing an absolutely incredible job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. I know you're doing a great job on the football front and so much more, so all the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, at Mid-Major Matt on Twitter, and I'm on the Prop Queens podcast on Mondays and Fridays. I retweet her stuff and I retweet and other stuff as well. All my selections are tracked on the Action Network app, so I'm as transparent as they come when it comes to my records and things like that. Good, bad, indifferent, whatever. Everybody knows what I am doing, and certainly I have not been doing as much college basketball as I did last year. I'm starting to learn that I don't need to bet as many games beginning because I'm still, like we've talked about, trying to get the data points. So I'll be doing a lot more of this as we get closer to December and things like that, but still making a lot of notes in my notebook and a lot of mental notes as to what I'm seeing so far in college basketball. And as I always say here, we're all trying to beat the books. So any questions anybody has about team totals or sides or anything, I think I'm going to be starting to take team totals for the teams going up against Gardner-Webb. They could be the worst team in the country. Bellarmine has played no defense so far, so I think those are 2 teams that I'm going to continue to target the opposition for their team totals because neither of them are playing defense right now.
With Gardner-Webb, they gave up 60 points in the first half to Richmond, and you're out there in the city of Richmond. Just how deplorable is that? Because with this Richmond team, you think slow and controlled. You don't think 60 points in the first half. You maybe think 60 points in a game.
Yeah, they are going faster, though, this year, Richmond. And that's why I'll be really interested to see what they're going to do. They've got a MTE coming up where they play Furman and I think either Charlotte or another team. So it's the first time they'll leave their gym this season. But look, Richmond's taking care of business against the teams that they've put on the schedule. But yeah, Gardner-Webb gave up 92 points to North Greenville at home. So this is a team that I'm definitely going to be fading because it feels like they just shoot. And if it misses, the other team's going to score. Let's move on. So I think some of the value might be gone after the Richmond game because they gave up 102 points to Richmond in 75 possessions. But I'm going to see if I can still find some value in fading this team by playing the opposition's team total over.
Well, they always say throw out the record books when you play against North Greenville. But that said, man, Gardner-Webb not having a good run of things. Fortunately, Matt, he always has a good run of things as he does a tremendous job here on the show whenever he joins me. He does great work over there in the city of Richmond, and he lends such great insight. So a big thanks to Matt for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots.
'Tis the season of gifting and halls to deck, and the who's and who Newville were in love with new tech. Where can we find Sonos and Samsung and Nintendo, they shouted. Would they find it in one place? This they questioned and doubted. When suddenly a who yelled, Walmart's the place to start! And each who added headphones, TVs, and games to their carts. With Walmart, their shopping was done in a flurry. They cried out, who knew? And ordered their gifts in a hurry. Shop the latest tech gifts in the Walmart app.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Matt Josephs, a.k.a. Mid-Major Matt. He does great work over there at ESPN Radio in Richmond. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, dialed in on all these college basketball teams, and he did so once again today. So big thanks to Matt for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_81, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games involving two bigger conference teams first. The conferences are going to be at the bottom, the extra games. This involves the MEAC, the SWAC, the NEC, the Northeast Conference, the Big South, the Patriot League, the, if I haven't said so already, Atlantic Sun is in there as well. And then at the bottom of the normal Las Vegas betting board and the extra games as well are going to be the tournament games. So it's going to be the Charleston Classic, the Virgin Islands Tournament, and then you get in terms of the extra games, the Pensacola Invitational. So a little bit convoluted, but that's it. We've got ourselves some fun. 643, 644 on the card. We do start with the game that's off the board as Northern Colorado and Cal State Fullerton do battle. Both of these teams played yesterday, and that's why this game is off the board, but I've got my handicap. I did set Northern Colorado as a 13.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay up to 13 with them. 14 or more, I'm going to be one to take this points with Cal State Fullerton, and then set a total to where a 155 or less. I'm in on the over, 156 or higher, the under. A little bit of fear here with regards to this total in that these are going to be teams playing game number 3 in 3 days, but that said, this is a Fullerton team that's actually looking to play quite a bit faster. They are in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game. They've got a little bit more of a point guard than they did a season ago, as they've been looking to Bryce Cofield to really headline things in the backcourt. He's done a nice job, give this team 3 assists, 13 points, as a little bit of a 6'6" do-it-all sort of guard for this team. They've got Kendrick DeLuna down low, who's been able to give you some nice rebounding. He's one of the main holdovers from a season ago at 6'10". He's been able to give you about 3 to 4 boards per contest, but I do think that Northern Colorado is very much going to be able to control the boards in this one. They were a top 10 team last season in terms of percentage of opponents' missed shots that they just rebounded themselves. They did not allow opponents to be able to get those second and third chances, and for Northern Colorado, they've had a tough time with the turnovers, about 14.5 turnovers per game. That said, Quinn Denker, who began his career over at Idaho, he's done a nice job giving the team 16.5 points, 7 assists. He's been able to find a lot of guys in space for open looks from 3. As right now, this team is shooting 37% from 3. I think that you're going to see a little bit of regression with the fact that Zach Block and Brock Wisney, who entered into yesterday, combined for 25.5 points per game. They are combined to shoot over 60% from 3-point range, but the Portland transfer and Vincent Delano has been able to lend a little bit of versatility. He's supplying about 7 points per contest. And then on the other side of things for this Fullerton team, they are currently well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Other than DeLuna, they don't necessarily have a ton down low, and they're still turning the ball over more than what you'd like to see. So this is a circumstance where I set a line of a 13.5. I'm willing to lay 13 with Northern Colorado, 14 or more. Take those points with Fullerton, and then 155 or less, I'm going to be in on the over, 156 or higher. The under, 645, 646 on the card. Robert Morris is going to be on the road against Monmouth. Monmouth is a 4.5 point favorite. Tonight's game is 149, and I did set Monmouth as a 4.5 point favorite, so going to be looking for a little bit of line movement here. At a 4 or less, I'd be willing to lay with Monmouth. If we get to 5 or more, that's my buy point on Robert Morris. As Robert Morris just not the same team that they were a season ago. Last year, they made the NCAA tournament, but you lose pretty much 5 out of your top 6 scores. I do like the fact that they bring in the NC Central transfer in Nicolas Chatakulis. Last season, he was given that A&T team right around about 9 rebounds per game, and he's been the top rebounder this season. And Deshaun Good, well, he's been good. He's been able to give his team 10 points, 8 boards. He comes over from IU Indy, but Ryan Prather is really that main guy that returns from a season ago. they've had him running a lot of the offense along Darius Livingston, a true freshman, so you've got a lot of inexperience in the backcourt, and it's a team that's only shooting about 31% from three. Now, Robert Morris, much like last season, a top 55 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but the 16 turnovers per game with that inexperienced backcourt, that has been really killing this team. And then for Monmouth, typically they have one go-to scorer. Last season it was Abdi Bashir. 2 years ago it was Xander Rice, and right now they've been looking a little bit more to Stefanos Bartilis, who's a true freshman that comes over from Greece. Deadline thinks 14 points per game, but it's not like they've got that 18 plus point per game score like they had a season ago. You're getting a little bit more Jack Collins and Andrew Ball, guys that they give you a modest amount of 8 to 9 points per game, but they're a little bit more versatile. Like Collins last year gave this team 6 boards, 3 assists, a little bit over a steal per contest. Has been a career about 31% three-point shooter, so he doesn't necessarily take the top off of a defense there. And this has been a Monmouth team that has struggled quite a bit with regards to being able to get the ball inside the arc, as last year they were a bottom 50 team in terms of their two-point shooting percentage, and they're back there this season. But you have had Jason Rivera-Torres, who actually saw some good minutes a few seasons ago over at Vanderbilt, come in and give the team 12.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. So you do have some shot blocking, and you do have Doc Mortar down low, able to give you multiple blocks per contest as well. This has been a Monmouth team that has been doing a relatively rough job in terms of taking care of the ball themselves. They've been turning the ball over about 15.5 times per game, and that's a big reason why I did set a total here of a 146.5. I do think that there's going to be a lot of sloppiness on both ends with regards to both of these teams. Robert Morris has been looking to push tempo a little bit more this season in terms of total possessions per game. Right now they're checking in about 208th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, you've got a Monmouth team that is typically a relatively mid-tempo team. They slowed down a bit to 271st. So did set my line at a 4.5, 4 less, willing to lay with Monmouth, 5 or more. Taking those points with Robert Morris, and you're at the 149. I'm in on the under. 647, 648 on the card. It's Old Dominion on the road against Drexel. Drexel's a 1.5 point favorite. Total is 142, and I did set a total of a 137.5. I'm going to be in on that under for Drexel. Just traditionally one of the slowest teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball. And once again, they are looking to play nice, slow, and controlled. 275th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Old Dominion has been playing a little bit faster than what I was anticipating. They're right now about 210th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and bigger reason why I say faster than expected is that Old Dominion last year was outside the top 355 in terms of three-point shooting percentage, and they've been rough on that end as well, shooting 31% from three-point range, but they do have rock-solid rebounding. Kalen Swanton-Roger, true 7-footer who comes over from Maryland. Last season gave the team about 6 boards per contest. That's down to about 5 rebounds per game thus far this season. But LJ Thomas, he was a do-it-all guy over at Austin Peay last year that gave that team 15-plus points, 4-plus assists, 5-plus rebounds. He's been Mr. Do-it-all. And Casey Shaw, who comes over from Maryland Eastern Shore, he's been the main headline scorer with 14 points per game, but Shaw's not too much of a three-point shooter. Thomas is right now shooting 42% from 3, but he's never been throughout his career a guy that really lights it up from 3, and they're trying to get Robert Davis acclimated once again after he was a 15-point per game scorer for them 8 seasons ago. Dealt with injuries to begin the season, but last 3 games he's been averaging 10 points per game after being very limited to begin the season, so that's going to be able to help them out quite a bit, and I do think that that'll be enough for them to be able to get the job done outright on the money line. I did set them as a 1.5 point favorite. You do have a Drexel team that's in all sorts of transition themselves, having lost 4 other top 5 scorers from 8 seasons ago. You've got Shane Blakeney, 12.5 points, 5 boards, and he's been able to give you in the mid-30s with regards to his three-point shooting, but you don't have that guy like a Kobe McGee from a season ago. You do have Kevon Vanderhorst, who's back from a year ago, 10 points, 4 boards, and you've got a lot of just overall rebounding on this Drexel team. You don't necessarily have that one main guy, but as of right now, you've got 7 different players that are giving you at least 4 rebounds per game, but I do think that Old Dominion is going to be able to match up down low. It's an Old Dominion team that last season was in the top 25 with regards to defensive rebound percentage, so I did set a line here of 1.5 with Old Dominion being the favorite. I do like them outright on the money line, and then set my total at a 137.5. I do like that under. 649, 650 on the betting board. It's from Greenbrier Colonial Hall. Butler and Virginia do battle. Virginia between a 4.5 to a 6-point favorite, and totals between 157.5 to a 159, and I disagree with this total. I set my total at 148.5. I do like the under with Virginia. This team is outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, and you've got 2 teams that have been pretty solid on defense. Both of these teams between 45th and 50th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now Virginia has also been pretty solid with their offense, as they're a top 15 team in all of college basketball in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and it's all because of the international man of mystery in Thaddeus DeRitter. He's been able to give the team 19 points, 6.5 boards. He's been rock solid there, and is also shooting over 40% for three. And Johan Groenlo, he is coming from, I believe, Antwerp, Belgium. He's been able to give you 4 blocks per contest. He's down low, giving you 7.5 rebounds per game as well. And then I also like the fact that you had Ogana Onyesu, who's been coming off the bench, but I still recall 2 years ago over at Kentucky, he was giving that team 2.5 plus blocks per contest. And for Butler, right now they are a top 40 team in terms of total possessions per game. Very much a warped number. They play that game against IU Indianapolis, and that just completely throws off the metrics. They also played against SMU. That's another game that throws things completely off. And if you throw out the SMU game along with the game against IU Indy, they've given up 72 points or fewer in every one of these games. And you do have in the backcourt a solid scorer in Finley Bizjack, who's been able to take some strides forward. He's been able to give you 3 assists, 15.5 points per game, but it's really the Michael Ajayi show. He was very good over at Pepperdine 2 seasons ago. Just did not find that main role over at Gonzaga last year, but 15 points, 12 boards, 3.5 assists. 2 years ago, actually shot over 45% for 3. That's way down this season, but it's a Butler team that as a whole is currently shooting over 40% for 3. Should see some regression there, despite Jalen Jackson being over at Fort Wayne last year, giving that team 19 points, good 3-point shooter. Jamie Kaiser was a little bit of this and that guy over at Maryland. He's been able to give you 12 points as well, so I like these guys, and I do think that Butler is going to be able to hold in there with Virginia. They've got some nice backcourt pieces as well. You bring in Malik Thomas, a 19-plus point per game scorer over at San Francisco last year, but I do think that in the end, Butler does a good job of being able to hold in there in a game that I think is going to feature a lot of one-and-done possessions. I think that that's going to be a little bit slower than a lot of people think as well, so I did set a total here of a 148.5. I like the under, and with Butler at 5+, I set them as a 4.5-point dog. Going to be willing to take those points. 651, 652 on the betting board. This is from Adam Jenkins Sports Complex, Southern Illinois and Delaware on a neutral court. As of right now, this is a game that is off the board, but I do have my handicap, as I did set Delaware as a 7-point underdog. Willing to take 7.5 or more with Delaware, 6.5 or less. Willing to lay with Southern Illinois. And then I set a total to where 154.5 or less. I'm in on the over, 155.5 or higher, the under. Delaware last year was one of the best 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball, and despite the fact that they lose John Canada and pretty much 3 of their top 4 scorers from a season ago, they've actually done a pretty solid job in terms of being able to hit threes. As of right now, it's a Delaware bunch as shooting right around about 35.5% from 3. They had some nice pickups in the offseason, in my opinion. A guy named Jameel Brown, who was in line to see some minutes over at Temple last year but got injured. He's been able to give you 10 points per contest. Justin Fernandez has been off the court. He's only been able to play in 1 game this far this season, but he was able to return in that game against St. Peter's. He's a high upside guy. He was a pretty highly touted recruit over at George Mason, was in the King English system over at Providence, and then you've got Christian Bliss, who's been able to shoot 45.5% from 3, but Delaware last year was well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and right now this team is getting dumped on the glass. They're well outside the top 225 with regards to rebound percentage, and I do think that Southern Illinois, who doesn't necessarily have like ideal size, I think that they're going to be able to win that battle down low, and the Scott Nagy style is always a very up-tempo one. Your number 1 over at Southern Illinois was not able to get things quite as cranked up as he'd like it to be, but this year the team in a small sample size is right now averaging about 87.5 points per contest. They bring in Karan House, who is over at Jacksonville State. He's been able to supply the team with 20 points, 3.5 assists per contest. You've got Davion Sykes, who he's been able to do a nice job in terms of giving the team 10.5 points per contest after he spent some time at Texas State. He's in year number 2 of this system after he was a little bit of a priority reserve for the team. And then you bring in Prince Alajibi, who he was a solid rebounder a few seasons ago when he was over at Boston College along with Seton Hall. And additionally, the fact that Isaiah Stafford has come off of injury and he's starting to get reacclimated. When he was at Valparaiso 2 years ago, was their main man with 17 points, 2 assists, 4 rebounds per contest. He's been able to come in, he's been able to give the team about 10 points per game. And Southern Illinois should see some positivity with the fact that they're shooting only about 27% from 3. They've actually been a top 50 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. And you do have a guy that's also been able to give you right around about 5.5 rebounds per game in Rollins Alajibi as well. So it's a circumstance where 6.5 or less is going to be willing to lay with Southern Illinois, 7.5 or more to get the points with Delaware, and then 154.5 or less. I like that over 155.5 or higher. The under 653, 654 on the card. It's Mount St. Mary's, and they are on the road facing off against Western Michigan, and Western Michigan finds themselves at a pick'em game. Total is 152.5. I like this total under. I did set my total at 142.5. You've got 2 struggling offenses here. Mount St. Mary's about 289th of the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Western Michigan clocking in at 242nd. And Western Michigan last year had the worst three-point shooting percentage at home in all of college basketball. They shot less than 25% from three-point range at home. I do think that they're going to be a little bit better this year, but that's it. With this Western Michigan team still leaving a lot to be desired on the offensive side of things, as right now their main man has been Jaden Brewer, comes on over from Florida International, where he gave that team 14 points per game last year, and he's been solid, 16 points, 8 boards, but he's a career about 25% three-point shooter. Max Burton is a nice rebounder, returns from a season ago. He's been able to give you about 7 boards per contest. You've got Jalen Griffith. He's been able to supply the team with 14 points per game, so these guys have all been able to do a pretty rock-solid job, and for this Western Michigan team, it is one that is back to shooting about 29% from three-point range. They themselves have been a little bit rough on the defensive side of things. They're outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and really what's killing Western Michigan right now is the turnovers. Over 16 turnovers per game, but it's not as if this Mount St. Mary's team is doing a great job of taking care of the ball either. It's a Mount St. Mary's team that's well outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers per possession on offense. As a matter of fact, well outside the top 300. They're turning the ball over 18 times per game, and they're not really putting pressure on teams. They're only generating 9 turnovers per contest on defense as well, and that's a big reason why I did set Western Michigan here as the 2.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them on this pick'em line. Now, Mount St. Mary's is actually shooting 36% from three-point range and shooting 59% at the free throw line, so do think that three-point shooting is going to be going downward, as you've had Arlandis Keys right now shooting 50% from three with 13 points per contest. He's been rock solid, but he's also missed a pair of games, as Xavier Lipscomb has had to be that main man in the backcourt. As Keys, he looks like he should be good to go in this one. He did return in that game against Maryland, looked pretty rock solid there, but that said, this is going to be a bunch that's still going to be built down low. Justin Mahdi began his career over at Tulsa along with James Madison. He's been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. You've had Trey DeVue, who's been able to come in. He's been able to give the team 11.5 points, and when he was over at Western Illinois last season, he was part-time starter for them. That shot in the mid-30s from 3, 9 points, 4.5 rebounds. So you get a little bit of versatility there. It has been a team that has been dealing with a few ailments to begin the season as well. They were expecting a little bit more from someone like an Anthony Arrington, who was coming on over from Wofford. So that's been a little bit of an issue for this Mount St. Mary's team, and a big reason why they're not taking care of the ball. And for Mount St. Mary's, this is just traditionally one of these slower teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball. Right now, they're 209th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but that includes an overtime game against Maryland. So if you look at possessions per 40 minutes, they're well outside the top 240 right now. And for Western Michigan, they've been looking to play a little bit more up-tempo, 60th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but I think they get a sloppy game where neither team can hit a shot. Set my total out of 142.5. I like the under, and with Western Michigan, like them on this pick'em line, made them the 2.5-point favorite. 655, 656 on the card. It is Portland, and they are going to be playing those to St. Thomas. And this is a game that is presently off the board, but I've got my numbers as St. Thomas I did set as a 3-point favorite, so 2.5 or less. Going to be willing to lay with them. 3.5 or more. I'm taking the points with Portland, and then made a total of 155. 154.5 or less in on the over. 155.5 or higher the under. For Portland, they have been a pretty up-tempo team thus far this season. Right now, they're 63rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. We got a St. Thomas team that entered into the day on Saturday as more of a lower tempo team. They've been slowing things down from where they were a season ago, about 229th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But that said, this is a St. Thomas team that last year was a top 15 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Now, entering into yesterday against Cal State Fullerton, they were a team that was a little bit outside the top 150, so they've taken a little bit of a fall off there, and they had themselves a very rough go of it against Cal State Fullerton. They lose that game 88-80, which they shot in that game 8 of 33 from three-point range, and much of it is because you do lose 2 out of your top 3 scorers from a season ago, as Noah Minsale, he's the top guy that returns for them, and he's been rock solid. He's been able to supply 22 points per game, but guys that you thought maybe would take a little bit of stride forward, Parker Bajirke, he was a guy that gave you like 5 to 6 points per contest last season. He really hasn't done so. Ryan Default, he's another guy that returns from a season ago. They haven't been able to do so. And for St. Thomas, this is just not a team that does a great job in terms of giving themselves second chances. They actually entered in the day on Saturday. They had the dead last in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage, merely the percentage of missed shots that you grab personally as an offensive rebound. But this is a Portland team that they themselves, even though they've got a 7-footer in Jermaine Balsinger-Webb, who he's been able to give the team about 7.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. They haven't done a great job on the glass either. It's a Portland unit that has a collective shoots in the mid-30s from 3. Joel Foxball has been a very good freshman for them, supplying over 15 points, but he's been turning the ball over 3.5 times per game, and that's a big thing for Portland. That's a big reason why I set them as an underdog. It's a Portland team that's right now turned the ball over 15 times per game. backcourt is a little bit out of sorts, as all the guys that came over from Eastern Washington with Shante Leggins, they're now out of the fold. And for this Portland bunch not being able to take care of the ball against a St. Thomas team that year in and year out is a top 50 team in terms of ball security, that means much more clean possessions for a St. Thomas team that last year they were a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis as well. Additionally, this is a Portland team that gives up a lot of shots from three-point range. As a matter of fact, the percentage of opponents' field goal attempts coming from three is in the top 20 in all of college basketball. They've been okay guarding the three, allowing teams to shoot about 32.5% from distance, but I do think that St. Thomas is going to be able to light it up there, and I do think that you're going to get a little bit more of an up and down game, despite the fact that both of these teams have played quite a bit of basketball here in the last few days. So willing to lay up to 2.5 with St. Thomas, 3.5 or more. Take the points with Portland, and then 154.5 or less. I'm in on the over, 155.5 or higher, the under. 657, 658 on the card. It's East Tennessee, and they're going to be playing against Louisiana Monroe. This is another strange game without numbers, but I do have my handicap for Louisiana Monroe. I did set them as an underdog of 13.5 points, 13 or less. I'm willing to lay with East Tennessee, 14 or more. Take the points with Monroe, 145 or less. I'm in on the over, 146 or higher, the under. Another case where with Louisiana Monroe, they played yesterday, so we've got a lot of these games where I just have to give you my handicap as a result. But that's it for Louisiana Monroe. I do think that they're a little bit better than they were a season ago. They bring in the former Troy coach in Phil Cunningham to be able to lead the way, and Martavius Russell has been very good. He's been able to get the team 15 points per contest, began his career over at Mississippi State, where he just was unable to find minutes for them, but when it comes down to it for this Louisiana Monroe team, they just don't have a ton of size down low. They were able to do a pretty solid job of holding in there against Morehead State yesterday, a game that went a little bit harebrained, a little bit crazy, and you do have some good versatility with Lovell Bruneau coming over from the non-D1 ranks. He began his career over at Wagner, and he's been able to give the team 5+ boards as a 6'5", little bit of a do-it-all sort of player, but it's a Monroe team that does leave something to be desired in terms of their three-point shooting, and for Monroe, they just have not been able to do a great job in terms of taking care of the ball as well, entering into yesterday about 14 turnovers per game. You've got an East Tennessee team that under Brooks Savage, they've always been a pretty rock-solid team on the glass. Now, they look to have taken a little bit of a setback from a season ago. They've got a lot of moving parts down low, but Jordan McCollum, he's done a nice job being able to get this team right around about 12 points, 6 boards per contest after he was at Murray State a season ago, where just really wasn't able to find his footing. You bring in Brian Taylor, who was over at SIU Edwardsville, and right now he's supplying the team with about 15.5 points per game, and I do think that what is going to be also huge is getting Alan Strouthers involved a little bit more, as he's just a pass-first guy. Right now, he's actually averaging more assists and points per game. He's generating a steal and a half per contest, so he's doing his part, and he's freeing up shots for someone like a Milton Matthews, who he began his career over at North Carolina A&T last year over at Florida A&M. He was a starter for them that was able to supply 15 points, shot in the high 30s from three. We did see ETSU last year be a relatively solid three-point shooting team. They did lose quite a few of those pieces, but should be able to rise up from the current 27.8% three-point shooting that they had going into the day on Saturday. And then you do have a UMass Lowell transfer in Cam Morris, who last year gave that team about 6 boards per contest. With Monroe not having a lot of size, I do think that ETSU going to do a solid job of being able to take control of this game. It is very clear that Monroe is going to be looking to play a little bit more up-tempo than they have in past seasons, with the way that they had actually a nice expose against Morehead State, currently a top 135 team in terms of total possessions per game. ETSU typically not a team that gets overly out of sorts. Right now, they're about 294th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So 13 or less going to be willing to lay with East Tennessee. 14 or more looking at Monroe, and then 145 or less and on the over, 146 or higher the under. 659, 660 on the card. It is Pittsburgh, and they play us Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac's a 14.5 point dog. This total opened up at a 146. Right now I am seeing a 142, and I made my total at 150.5. I do like the over. Now for Pittsburgh, they are not playing very up-tempo at all, but I do think that's a little bit of a byproduct of the competition. Playing against West Virginia, that's not going to help you out too much right now in terms of total possessions per game. Pittsburgh clocking in at just 335th in all of college basketball. Typically under Jeff Capel, they've been maybe a little bit below average, but they've been a relatively average team with regards to their tempo, and this is a Quinnipiac squad that certainly is looking to push a little bit of tempo, 111th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and with regards to Quinnipiac, I do think that they hold in there because you do return a guy that I really like in Amari Monroe. Last year, he was able to give the team 18 points, 9 boards, and he's been able to do a pretty rock-solid job this season in terms of being able to supply for this bunch, as he's been also throwing their 3.5 steals per game. And big thing for Quinnipiac is they are a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They were last year. Haven't quite done that this year, but a lot of that is a byproduct of the fact that you have to play St. John's begin the season. They were able to take it to the non-Division I team that they played, but they also had to play against Yale. They got got completely dump trucked in that game. You look to someone like an Asim Jones, who began his career at Florida International. He's been able to do a solid job coming in there, giving this backcourt right around about 7.5 points per game. Last year over at FIU, 9.5 points. He was able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3, and that was really the kryptonite for Quinnipiac last year. Last year, well outside the top 250 in terms of their three-point shooting percentage, but you bring back Jaden Zimmerman, a 13-point per game scorer. That's always been a mid-30s three-point shooter, and on the other end for Pittsburgh, this has been a team that's been pretty solid in terms of their three-point shooting. You've had Omari Weatherspoon come in. He's been able to help out the backcourt along DeMarco Minor. These are your main two guys. As for Weatherspoon, right now he's supplying about 8 points, 3 assists per contest. Minor, he was over at Oregon State last season, and he's just a do-it-all guy. 11 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists. Shoots for his career right around about 30% from 3, so you'd like to see that go northward just a little bit. But that said, you've also had Braden Cummings come in, and he's been Cummings around with about 12.5 points per contest. But this is a Pittsburgh team that's very much looking to form themselves down low, as Cam Corn is right now averaging a double-double, 14 points, 10 boards, a little bit over a block per game. As Pittsburgh, they just don't generate turnovers the way that they have in past years. They're well outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. That should lead to some nice clean possessions for Quinnipiac, and I think that Quinnipiac is going to be able to match that fight down low. So do you think that Quinnipiac speeds this game up? I think that they give up some open threes to Pittsburgh, a team that's right now shooting about 36% from three-point range. So I do like the over in this ordeal. I did set my total at a 150.5, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with Quinnipiac. 661, 662 on the card. It is Northwestern and South Carolina. They do battle on a neutral court out there from the great state of West Virginia, if I'm not mistaken, Greenbrier Colonial Hall. And right now for Northwestern, 5.5 point favorites, seeing as high as a 7 out there as well. 137.5 to 138.5 is the total, and this is a total I did set at a 141.5. I do like the over for Northwestern. The offense has been incredibly efficient, and for Northwestern, they always do a great job of taking care of the ball. This is always a team that's going to rank in the top 40 in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. And for Northwestern, are they an up-tempo team? No, they really have never been under Coach Collins. But that said, even though they're just 277th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, right now they are averaging a little bit over 80 points per game. They had a nice showing in their game against Virginia a few days ago. Now you need to get Nick Martinelli a little bit online. He's averaging 18 points per game, but in that game against Virginia where it was close but no cigar for the team, he had a single-digit amount of points, so you need a little bit more there. But Arrington Page, he's come in, he's been able to supply 17 points, 8 boards, began his career over at Cincinnati, and he's been a great fit for this team. You've had Justin Mullins be able to do a nice job off the bench, just give you a little bit of versatility at 6'6", not a great three-point shooter, but 5.5 points per contest. And with this Northwestern team, even though they don't turn the ball over a lot themselves, they're pretty good at generating turnovers. They're getting about 13 steals per game, and I do think that for Northwestern, they should see a little bit of a downward tick from the fact that they're shooting a bit over 40% from three-point range. But we've seen South Carolina play a little bit faster this year. Not as if the South Carolina team is going to be playing at warp speed or anything like that, but last year they were hovering right around about 300th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They're more of a mid-tempo team this year at about 183rd. You've been able to get good production on Michi Johnson, who's back for his second go-around with his program. He's averaging 16.5 points per game, and currently he's shooting 40% from 3. Do think that's going to be going downward, but you've got more versatility than ever before. You've got 6'8" Mongolian Mike. I'm not going to try to say the last name of Miles Sute, who's saying 6'7". Both of these guys are capable of shooting from 3. Sute has been a career mid-33 point shooter, has been a little bit cold this year at 24% from the outside. Mongolian Mike just does a little bit of everything. 12 points, 6 boards, pair of assists, steal per contest. Really like his overall game, and I do think that that's going to be able to keep the South Carolina team very lively in this game. I only set them as a 3.5 point underdog as a result, and Norden Kopic, who's not really giving you a lot of scoring, he's been able to do a nice job as a little bit of a rim protector for this team as well. And for South Carolina, they're making the most out of their possessions as well, only turning the ball over 10.5 times per game. Both of these teams are allowing their opponents to shoot less than 20% from three-point range. I do think you see that go northward a little bit. I do think that both of these teams do a nice job executing on offense. So I do like the over, so my total 141.5, and at 4+, I'm willing to take those points with South Carolina. 663, 664 on the card. It is Air Force, A playoffs, IU Indy. IU Indy is right now a 4.5 point dog, and your total is 183.5, and I said IU Indy as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot here on the money line, and I said a total of a 164.5, just flat out because Air Force, I think, is going to look to slow this game down. I think that they're actually going to be successful in doing so. Air Force, year in and year out, outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. The one thing that Air Force always does a pretty solid job of is being able to shoot it from 3. Last few seasons, they've been a top 125 team in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. Right now, they're shooting about 34.5% from 3, and I think that that's a pretty sustainable number. You've had Cam Sanders be able to supply the team with 11 points. He's not shooting the ball from 3, but he's been able to dole out about 4 assists per game. And for Air Force, the big thing is they're turning the ball over 16 times per game, and that plays right into the hands of IU Indy. IU Indy is right now leading all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, and with their full court pressure style, they are going to pressure you for 94 feet. That just absolutely takes it out of you. So I do like IU Indy here outright on the money line. I did set them as a 2.5 point favorite. Now, a little bit of fear with them being at elevation that maybe it takes it out of them towards the back half of the game. But for Air Force, they're not going to be able to do a great job down low because they, year in and year out, are well outside the top 3 with regards to rebound percentage. They've been a little bit better thus far this season after Wesley Chalkowski. He last year as a 7-footer gave the team 2 rebounds per game. He's up to 3.5 rebounds per game. So yay, barely there, but you've been able to have Caleb Walker be able to come in at 6'9", give you 6 boards per contest, and Eli Robinson, he's been able to give this team about 12 points, 7 rebounds per game after he just could not find a way to be able to get out there on the floor as a freshman. But for IU Indy, I do very much believe in this Ben Howlett style. He's brought quite a few guys with him from the non-D1 ranks. Matt Compass, Kyler Diagostino have both been able to give you 14.5 points per game. It's not an IU Indy team that's going to just completely light you up from 3. They're shooting 32% from 3-point range, but they do a nice job generating those turnovers. They've been winning the turnover battle by an average of 9 turnovers per game, and with this Air Force team just being unable to take care of the ball. And I know that Air Force is at elevation, and that's going to take a little bit of it out of IU Indy, which is a big reason why I did set a lower total here of a 164.5, and we have noticed that those IU Indy totals have gone up a little bit higher, but this is actually a higher total in terms of what we've been seeing in comparison to the last few IU Indy games, with this Air Force team being well outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that you get a little bit more of a slog of a game, and with this Air Force team, they just year in and year out get completely outgunned on the glass, and that's really the issue that you got with IU Indy. You don't necessarily have great rebounding on this team, but that said, I do think that this IU Indy team gets the job done outright on the money line. I set them as a 2.5 point favorite. I like IU Indy here. I did make my total a 164.5, so in on the under 665, 666 on the card. It is UNC Greensboro taking on Youngstown St. This is a neutral court game where Youngstown St does find themselves as a 5.5 to a 6.5 point favorite. Totals between 155.5 to a 156.5, and this is a spot where I set Greensboro as an underdog of 6.5 points. So here at a 6 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay with Youngstown St. Youngstown St currently checking in outside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I do think that that's going to rebound, as this Youngstown St team was a top 100 unit with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis a season ago. It's been a little bit rough for them to start, and that's going to happen when you lose someone in a Gabe Dines, who he's at like 7'3", was able to give the team 3 blocks per contest last season. But I do like the fact that they bring in Bryson Dawkins to be able to pair up with Chris Carroll, who's been your main scorer. He's been able to supply the team with a double-figure amount of points. With Dawkins, he's been doing a little bit of this and that after he was rock solid over at Houston Christian last year for that Houston Christian team. 14 points, 5 boards, and this year about 9.5 points per game. It is a Youngstown St team that is not really looking to push tempo either. 232nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and they've dealt with a injury to their international man of mystery who comes in from UT Martin and Vladimir Saldarizde, and for Saldarizde, he's returned in the last 2 games. That should be able to give the team a little bit more down low, as well as he's 6'7", a little bit of a combo guy, shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range over at UT Martin last season. And for this Youngstown St team, they have been a top 75 unit in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they face off against a Greensboro team that they had to replace 9 out of their top 10 scores from the season ago. Now for Greensboro, not the world's worst offense. They're about like 230th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they are not hitting the boards whatsoever. This team is right now 355th in terms of percent of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Getting back Valentin Pinedo, who transfers on over from St. Francis of Pennsylvania, should be able to help out down low. Last year over at St. Francis, he gave that team 10.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, but he, along with Justin Neely, who's a 6'5", a little bit of an undersized big man that comes in from Albany and has actually given the team 11 rebounds per game, were the main splash guys coming in, and they have to worry about the perimeter shooting that's been so rock solid for this team in past years. They do bring in a guy in KJ Younger, who's been able to give you 12.5 points. He's been able to shoot in the high 30s from 3-point range. Donald Whitehead Jr., he's a guy that's been able to supply the team with 13.5 points, give you a little bit of facilitation as well, and for Whitehead, he comes on up from the non-D1 D1 ranks, but I do think that this is a Youngstown State team that should be able to do a pretty rock-solid job on defense. Not going to get too much of an up-and-down game. Greensboro is currently in the top 125 in terms of total possessions per game. I think that that's a little bit more of a byproduct of playing against the teams like Queens NC. They played against NC State, and they played against a lot of up-tempo teams. Usually Greensboro outside the top 250, and I think that they returned there. So made a total of 146.5. I'm in on the under, and with Youngstown State, one to lay up to 6 with them. 667, 668 on the card. It is Detroit, and they are going to be on the road against DePaul. DePaul is a 17.5 to an 18-point favorite. 147.5 is the total, and with the Detroit, I did set them as a underdog here of 16.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with this Detroit unit. It has been interesting under Mike Montgomery, the way that they've been able to just form things around Orlando Lovejoy. He's a do-it-all player, giving you 14 points, 4 assists. Last year gave the team quite a few rebounds, and has yet to do that this year, as Detroit is really getting pounded on the glass right now. As for this Detroit team, they don't have a single player that's giving you more than 5 rebounds per game. They've been able to generate some second and third chances, so as you've had TJ Nadeau, who's been able to give you 12 points per game. He's shooting in the high 30s from 3. It is a Detroit team that should see some positivity with the fact that they're currently shooting 23.9% from 3-point range. I recognize that they lost a lot of the backcourt from a season ago, but that should be going northward. Aiden Carter has been a nice pickup for this team as he comes on over from the great state of Ohio. He's given the team 12 points, 5 rebounds per game, so nice little bit of versatility there, but Legend Geeter has not been able to Geeter done in terms of providing a lot of rebounding. He's back after last year. He gave the team 8 points, 4 rebounds per game. Has just never really been able to get above like 4.5 rebounds per game, though, and for this DePaul team, they've already lost at home to Buffalo. That was a little bit less than savory, and they did have to replace quite a bit the backcourt from the season ago, as, Connor Enright doing a good job of being able to dish it out, and that's led to the team turning the ball over about 13.5 times per game and shooting only about 31% from 3. I do think that number goes northward. You've got Landon Blocker back from a season ago, who's become really that main facilitator. 11 points, right around about 4 assists per game, and Brandon Macklin, he comes in from Radford, where he was given that team right around about 3.5, 4 assists per contest, but they're just not as great as you were able to get with Enright last season. They also bring in RJ Smith from Colorado, and he has yet to really be able to pay dividends for this backcourt as well. Down low, they did return their top rebounder, NJ Benson, and he should be able to win the battle down low for this team, right around about 11.5 points, 8 boards, 2 blocks per contest, and Caleb Banks does provide a little bit of everything. Began his career at Indiana. Last year at Tulane, right around about 14.5 points, 6.5 boards. Shot in that neighborhood about 31% from 3 as a 6'7", little bit of a do-it-all wing player. But I do think that for Detroit, they should see a little bit of a rise up with regards to that 3-point shooting. It is a DePaul team that is not really going to be looking to push tempo. They're outside the top 175 in terms of total possessions per game. It's not a Detroit team that I think is going to play super slow. It's not one that I think is going to be playing super fast either. As for the Detroit team, even with having a little bit of a wonky schedule to begin the season, they're right around about 90th in terms of total possessions per game, but do think that you get some made threes here. Did set my total at a 148.5, so I'm in on the over, and with Detroit, I'm going to take 17 plus with them. 669, 670 on the card. It is Western Illinois, and they're going to be playing us to North Dakota. Right now, this is a game that's off the board because we've got a few interesting back-to-back spots here, but that's with Western Illinois. I did set them as a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3.5 with them, 4.5 or more, taking those points with North Dakota, and then made a total of a 146, so 145.5 or less, in on the over, 146.5 or higher, the under. It's a Western Illinois team that traditionally is quite slow and controlled last year, outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game, and they're right back there, 345th in terms of total possessions per game. And North Dakota, they're a relatively mid-tempo team this year, 156th in terms of total possessions per game, but I think that you're going to get some lackluster defense. Got a Western Illinois team that was actually a good 3-point shooting team on the road last season. This season, they've been shooting in that neighborhood about 33% from the outside. Even with losing someone like Ryan Myers from the backcourt, they've been able to do a nice job in terms of bringing in Tyron Cook, who was a nice double-figure scorer a few seasons ago over at VMI. He's been able to give the team 8 points per game. The big thing for this Western Illinois team is finding a main facilitator. Right now, they do not have a single player that has been able to give you over 2 assists per game. As a team, they're averaging 5.8 assists per game. There's a lot of individuals averaging more than that, but they have been able to form an identity down low. Isaiah Griffin, a starter over at Idaho State last season, along with Francis Nwakosa, have been able to combine for about 11.5 rebounds per game, and with these teams playing a lot of games in a short amount of time. I do think the fact that you've got a Western Illinois team that plays a little bit more slow and controlled and through their big man is actually very rock solid in this ordeal. Meanwhile, you've got a North Dakota team that they're a little bit better defensively this year. They've been outside the top 200 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. So you've had Garrett Anderson do a nice job being able to chip in there about 10 points per game. And with regards to the three-point shooting of this team, it's right around about 34%. Not great, not terrible. You've had Marley Curtis be able to shoot 47.5% for three with his 9 points per contest, and Zach Kraft right around 48% for three with 10.5 points per game. But this squad time and time again has always had a tough time on the glass. Looks like that's going to be the case once again this year, as George Nechavili has been able to give you 5 rebounds per game. He's right now leading the charge down low, but this team was well outside the top 275 with regards to rebound percentage, and where they really get bludgeoned is inside. This is a unit that entered in the day on Saturday, allowing opponents to shoot over 65% from 2-point range. That is a bottom 5 mark in all of college basketball, and this is a Western Illinois team that, even though you've got some okay 3-point shooting with this team, this is very much a team that builds themselves around being able to play relatively good down low, just being tough and tenacious. Right now, about 55.5% of their points come from made twos. That is a top 60 mark in all of college basketball, so I do think that Western Illinois wins from within. I'm willing to lay up to 3.5 with them, 4.5 for more, take the points with North Dakota, and then 145.5 or less in on the over, 146.5 or higher the under. 671, 672 on the card. It is Murray State. They're going to be playing against Middle Tennessee. This is a neutral court game from John Gray Coliseum, and right now with Middle Tennessee, they are an underdog of 5.5 to 6 points. So on this game, it is 162.5 to 163, and with Murray State, I did set them as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 6 with them. You've got two teams that are really looking to crank up their tempo. Murray State is right now about 40th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Middle Tennessee more in the neighborhood, about 90th, though. For Middle Tennessee, they've really only played 2 Division I teams as far, Evansville and Michigan, so a little bit of a small sample size there. Meanwhile, for Murray State, it's been very much a team that has been looking to cut teams off from the perimeter. They are allowing the fewest amount of 3-point shot attempts of their opponents of any team in all of college basketball, while they themselves are attempting darn near 30.5 threes per game. As Javon Jackson, he's come on over from Illinois Chicago. He's supplying the team with 18 points, shooting over 46% from 3-point range. I do think that that's going to be going downward. Last season when he was over at Illinois Chicago, wasn't shooting quite as well from 3-point range. He was more in the neighborhood about 30%, but he's a career about 35% outside shooter. You've got Frederick King down low, who should be a nice dominator for a team that has really allowed a lot of offensive rebounds. They have been well outside the top 320 in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. They're allowing opponents to right now grab 15 offensive rebounds per game, but he's been able to give the team nearly 2 blocks, 14.7 rebounds per game. And then Romad Dean, who comes on over from Fordham, he's been able to supply the team with about 4 boards as well. He at 6'7", 6'8", is able to pop it a little bit from 3, but Mason Miller, after he shot over 44% from 3 2 seasons ago over at Creighton, he's back on that clip as well. And then with this Middle Tennessee team, they did lose a lot of the backcourt from a season ago, so you're going to be relying a lot on Kamani Lands, who he last season was able to give the team right around about 10 points per contest. He actually is a former top 100 recruit of Indiana, so he does a nice job in terms of being able to provide the team some spacing. And then Torrey Olson, last season, he was a pretty rock solid piece as well, was able to give the team 6 points, 5 boards, not necessarily a guy that's going to light it up from 3, but he's able to give you a little bit of rough and tumble down low. And this for a Middle Tennessee team that traditionally they're good at being able to generate turnovers. They're currently generating 17 turnovers per game, but if you look against D1 foes, it goes down to more like 12.5 turnovers per game. They've been able to do a nice job in terms of being able to just own the glass as well. This has been a top 100 team with regards to rebound percentage, but here's the thing with this bunch. They are attempting nearly all their shots from 3-point range. They're attempting over 50% of their field goal attempts from 3, and this has been a squad that has failed to get to the free throw line outside the top 350 in terms of percentage of their possessions that end in a free throw. Murray State has been able to do an okay job in terms of guarding the 3-point arc thus far. They're allowing teams to shoot about 34% from 3, but again, they're allowing fewer 3-point attempts than any other team in all of college basketball, and I do think that that's going to hurt this Middle Tennessee team. So set my line at 6.5. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 6 with Murray State. So my total at 154.5, so also in on the under. 673, 674 on the card. It is Illinois State, and they're going to be playing us at Coastal Carolina, and the Chanticleers are right now off the board, as I believe that one of these teams played yesterday, so I've got my handicap. I did set Illinois State as a 10.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 10 with them, 11 or more. Take the points with Coastal Carolina, then set a total of a 140.5, 140 or less, in on the over, 141 or higher. Going to be in on the under, and I initially saw an 8.5 point line with Coastal Coastal Carolina being an underdog with a total of 145.5. If we get that back up in the AM, I'd be willing to take a shot with regards to Illinois State laying a 8.5, and then I would be in on the under. You've got a Coastal Carolina team that last year was outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. They've been speeding themselves up a little bit more this year, but they also didn't generate any turnovers whatsoever. So this Illinois State team, they're going to get a lot of good, clean possessions. And same goes for Coastal Carolina. Illinois State last year was outside the top 290 in terms of their total possessions per game, but we're just really efficient on offense. Right now, shooting 33% from three. I think that should be going northward. Johnny Kinzinger, he's been able to get the team 13 points. He's shooting in the high 30s from three, so he's duplicating last year's numbers. And Bowden Skunberg, who 2 years ago, he was over at North Dakota State. He's coming off of injury, still trying to reacclimate. He's been able to give you 7.5 points per game, but I do believe that the low post play is going to be pretty rock solid for Illinois State this season. You've got Landon Wolf pulling in there 6 boards per contest. Brandon Leib, a true 7-footer that began his career over at Illinois, and Chase Walker, who at 6'9", he weighs like 290 pounds. He's a load. They're both giving you 6 boards per contest as well. And with this Coastal Carolina team, you had Noah Ammenhauser, 7'2" big man last season, doing a nice job controlling things down low. And now you've got a little bit of a lack of size. It's Jerry Ngokpat. He's really your main big man. He's saying 6'11", comes in from Louisiana Monroe, where it's not like he was necessarily the best big man. He gave that team 6 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. So he's leaving a little bit of something to be desired on that front. Now I do like the fact that you bring back Rashid Jones, your top scorer from last year, with about 13 points per game. And Joshua Beadle, he was actually seeing some starts over at Boston College last year. Gave that team about 6 points, career of 34% three-point shooter. He ups the just backcourt play that you get with regards to this Coastal Carolina team. And for Coastal Carolina, they've done a nice job in terms of cutting off teams from three. Their aligned teams only shoot 25% for three against small sample size, and they've done a nice job in terms of owning the defensive boards. They're currently a top 50 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so not a lot of second chances to be had by either of these teams. Both of these teams play relatively slowly, so if we get that 145.5, I'm going to be in on the under, but I do think that Illinois State does a good job from within. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 10 with Illinois State. 675, 676 on the card. This is from Charleston. You've got Georgia, and they're playing against Clemson. Clemson is a 2 to 2.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 157.5, and I did set a total here of a 151. I'm going to be in on the under, and I made Georgia the 3-point favorite. I like them outright on the money line. Georgia should see a rise with their 3-point shooting. They're right now shooting as a collective under 27% from 3-point shooting. Despite that, they have been a top 50 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they have won every one of their games. Luke Kane, Jeremiah Wilkerson have been the heads of the snake, being able to supply a combined 29.5 points per game. Kane has been able to give you 5.5 boards. Neither of these guys are shooting above 20% from three. As a matter of fact, you don't have a single player other than Justin Bailey, who's right now averaging 5.8 points per game, and also Brandon Klatsky, who's attempted, I believe, 3 threes thus far this season that are shooting above 30% from the outside. So we should be seeing a little bit of rebound there. But speaking of rebounding, this is a Georgia team that has very much been able to own the glass. Now they're allowing a lot of second and third chances as well. In terms of defensive rebound percentage outside the top 3, in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, they've been inside the top 25, but where they're really excelling is being able to generate turnovers. This bunch is number 6 in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a Clemson unit that is more around about 246. Now, Georgia did lose RJ Godfrey in the offseason, so the rebounding is leaving a little bit of something to be desired. Their main man down low has been Dylan James, be able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game. And Clemson brings in Nick Davidson, who I really liked over at Nevada last season. He was able to supply that team with 14 plus points, 7 plus boards per contest, and right now 8.5 points, 4.5 boards, and it's just a holes greater than some of its parts approach right now with Clemson. Clemson does not have a single player that gives you more than 11.7 points per contest, with Carter Welling being that main man, but right now they've got 8 different guys that will be able to give you at least 6.5 points per game. It's a Clemson team that's doing a great job taking care of the ball as well. Only 8 turnovers per game. That's a top 10 mark in terms of ball security in college basketball, despite the fact that they've got a new backcourt. They bring in Justin Porter from Middle Tennessee, who's been able to give you 9.5 points per game. You've had a pair of assists out of Ace Buckner, who's been able to do a nice job in that backcourt as well. That said, I do think that RJ Godfrey, who was over at Georgia last season, boomerang transfer, he is going to do a solid job down low for Clemson. I do think that things are going to be a little bit slower. Clemson typically outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, and you do have a Georgia team that's right now playing at warp speed. Georgia is 25th in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, but again, this is a Georgia team that's been a top 5 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and I do think that that defense wins out. So Georgia is a 3-point favorite. I like them on the money line. Set by total 151. I'm also in on the under. 677, 678 on the card. It is the X-Men of Xavier taking on West Virginia. West Virginia, a 6 to 6.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 140.5, and Set my line at 4. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Xavier. I do believe that this backcourt is getting better for Xavier after they brought in a lot of mid-major, shall we say, all-stars to be able to run it. You got Always Right, that's his actual name, coming on over from Valparaiso, where he was doing a nice job doling it out over there, and he's been able to get this team 10.5 points per game. Trey Carroll comes over from Florida Atlantic, has been the main man thus far, 15.5 points, 5.5 boards, 3.5 assists per game, and then you've got Jovan Misevich, who's been able to shoot over 40% from 3, but he's still a little bit of a work in progress. Really like the fight that this team showed a few days ago against Georgia. It looked like they were going to get blown out of that game, and then they made things very, very interesting, as the Xavier defense, I think, is going to be the strong part of this team. Right now, they are a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They are really taking it on the chin down low, though. This team is outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but they're not allowing second chances. They've been a top 50 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and you have a coach in Richard Pitino that, in his style over at New Mexico last season, that was a top 20 team in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and West Virginia is really slowing things down under Coach Russ Hodge, who he comes on over from North Texas. He's got this team outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, and for West Virginia, the defense has been very good to start the season in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, checking in number 14 in all of college basketball. And I do think that their three-point shooting is going to be going northward a little bit. Hunter Huff is right now giving you just really some great three-point shooting, 44.9% from the outside, 17 points per game. But outside of him, it's been a little bit hit or miss, as you've only been able to get about 22% three-point shooting out of Tracy Eaglestaff, only 5 points per game after he was a really good scorer over in North Dakota last season. You've got a versatile piece in Jasper Floyd, who he and Brennan Laurent, they come on over with Hodge to West Virginia. Both of these guys have combined for about 22 points per game. Floyd is a little bit of a do-it-all guard, right around 3.5 boards, 2.5 steals, 4 assists per game, and then Laurent has been the main rebounder with 7 boards per contest, and the 7-footer in Harlan Obia has been able to give you about 6 boards per contest as well. So I do think that West Virginia does a pretty rock-solid job down low. They've been not generating a lot of offensive rebounds for themselves, but a top 25 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so I think they get a little bit of a slog of a game that Xavier does just enough to hold in on. I did set my line here at 4. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Xavier, and with regards to this total, main line a 138, I'm in on the under. 679, 680 on the card. It is Yale and College of Charleston doing battle from Virgin Islands, and with College of Charleston, they are a 6.5 to a 7.5 point dog. 152.5 to 153.5 is the total, and I set a total here of 155.5. I do like the over. Yale is a top 20 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis in games played away from them. A little bit of a less than savory end of that game against UW Green Bay a few days ago, but man, you got a lot of weapons that have all sorts of versatility. Nick Townsend is back after he a season ago gave the team 15 plus points per contest. At 6'7", right now is bearing 55% of his threes, 17 points, 7.5 boards per contest. Isaac Salazar, he's rock solid down low. He's been able to give you 6 boards, 3 assists, 12 points per game. Overall, Yale is shooting 46.5% from three-point range. We'll see a little bit of regression there, but overall doing a nice job on that front. And this has been a team that's done a great job in terms of being able to hit the offensive glass as well. Teams are not doing a great job in terms of rebounding against them. Meanwhile, for Charleston, their numbers are a little bit warped by the fact that they had a lot of injuries to begin the season. Mr. Dean, first name Mr., last name Dean, Bryce Baker, Connor Hickman, all dealt with ailments. They're still without Kobe Duggan, a 15-plus point per game scorer over at Campbell last season, but Mr. Dean, in his 3 games back, he's been able to give you 10 points, 3 assists per contest. That gives a little bit of direction for this team. And Connor Hickman, he 2 seasons ago was very rock solid over at Bradley. Gave that team 14.5 points, 3 assists, shot 40% from 3. Last year had a tough time getting out there on the floor for Cincinnati. He should be able to give this team a lot of pop as well. Just returned for his first game in their game on Friday. And then you do have Christian Reeves, a true 7-footer, comes on over from Clemson, 7 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and that gives this team a little bit more rough and tumble down low than they've had in past seasons. It is a Charleston team that's really been struggling from three-point range, shooting 23% from 3, and this is a team that they're very much looking to take quite a few threes. I think that is going to be going very northward, and I do think that Yale goes through a little bit of regression. Charleston, I think, is going to want to bump up their tempo when it's all said and done. I could easily see this being a top 75 team in terms of total possessions per game. Yale's typically a little bit more of a mid-tempo team, so it makes it very interesting in this ordeal. I did set my line as a result at a 5.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Charleston, and with this total, I made mine a 155.5. So right now seeing the 153.5, I'm in on that over. 681, 682 on the card. Evansville is going to be playing against Akron from Virgin Islands, and Akron is a 13.5 point favorite. Your total on this game between 155.5 to a 156.5, and with Evansville, I did set them as an underdog of 10.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to take those points. Now, Akron has been a really good offensive team thus far this season, and they're looking to bump up their tempo as well. This is an Akron unit that is back in the top 75 in terms of total possessions per game, but now they play an Evansville team that's looking to go pretty slow and controlled. They've been 318th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and with this Evansville bunch, it's been up, down, all around in terms of what we've gotten out of the team thus far this season, but they did retain quite a few of their main low post pieces from a season ago. They have to replace pretty much the entirety of the backcourt with Gabe Pizzato and company being out, but you bring back Joshua Hughes. He stands in that neighborhood about like 6'10" or so, and he's been able to give the team 13 points, 7 boards, and has actually been a really good 45% three-point shooter. You don't really get that versatility out of Connor Turnbull, but he's back as a 6'10" big man, 12.5 points, 2 blocks, 4 boards, so he does a little bit more of the dirty work inside. And then you bring in AJ Casey, who he began his career over at Miami and St. Louis, highly touted recruit, and he just has never really been able to give you versatility, but at 6'9", he's throwing in there 5 boards per contest as well. So Evansville going to be very much looking to win from within. It's an Evansville team that's only shooting about 30.5% from three-point range, but I think they hold in there against an Akron team that has been very explosive with their three-point shooting, and do you think that we might be seeing a little bit of just a slowdown with this team in general, as right now they're only turning the ball over 9.5 times per game. I do think that that goes a little bit higher, as they've got Tavari Johnson, along Shema Scott, doing a really good job of being able to guide the team with a combined 29 points, 8.6 assists, only 1.6 turnovers per game between the two of them, and Johnson shooting 44% from the outside. Evan Mahaffey, who began his career over at Ohio State, shooting 43% from 3. Good versatility at about 6'6", 5 boards, 12 points, and has thrown in there 3.5 assists per game. And for Akron, they've been good in terms of generating turnovers as well. A top 65 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're really not putting teams on the free throw line too much, and they've done a nice job being able to control the boards as well. Akron, a top 80 team in terms of rebound percentage, but I do think that Evansville matches up well down low, and I think that Evansville gets this game slowed down just a little bit out there on a neutral court. Semi-total 154.5. I like the under, and anything above 11 here with Evansville. 683, 684 on the card. This is from Charleston. You've got Boston College and Tulane doing battle. Tulane, a underdog of 2 to 2.5 points. This opened up at 3. Total on this game between 137.5 to a 138. I made Tulane the 3.5 point favorite. I like them outright on the money line. Now, we should see Boston College start to rebound a little bit in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage, as for Boston College, right now they're shooting less than 25% from 3. That's not necessarily so savory, to say the least, but that said, it's not like you've got a lot of weapons outside of Donald Hand. Donald Hand last season, he did a nice job giving the team 14 points, 5 boards, and he's doing that once again this season. You bring in Fred Payne, who's back from a season ago, give you 11 points per game, and Chase Forte began his career over at UNC Asheville. He's been all around. He was last year over at South Dakota, where he gave that team 18 points, 2 steals. But he's never been a great 3-point shooter, though, shooting just for his career about 27.5% from the outside, and with this Boston College team, they're very much looking to win from within. This has been a top 100 team with regards to rebound percentage. Bowden Koepke, he comes over from Butler. He's been able to provide nice 6'11" size, 9.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. And Jaden Hastings, he's been able to supply 5.5 rebounds per game as well. But it's actually really been Aiden Shaw, who's been able to give you a little bit over 9 rebounds per game. Began his career over at Missouri, not give you like any scoring whatsoever, but has been able to do a nice job in the post. But for Tulane, I think that Rowan Brumba is going to be the best guard out there on the floor for a Tulane team that's right now shooting 36.5% from 3. That goes up to 40.9% in a road/neutral court setting, with Brumba 46% 3-point shooter, 20 points, 4.5 boards, 2.5 steals per contest. It is a Tulane team that's done a great job in terms of taking care of the ball, and that's really been one of the hallmarks of this Coach Ron Hunter style. Right now, they're turning the ball over 9.5 times per game, despite being in the top 150 in terms of total possessions per game. They're also averaging 5 offensive rebounds per game. That is a bottom 3 mark in all of college basketball. They are not grabbing second chances, but that said, I do think that Tyler Ringgold, who's been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of giving this team right around about 10 points, 4 boards, a little bit of versatility, should be able to help out with that regard. You've got Escher Woods and Curtis Williams combining for about 22 points per contest, and with this Tulane team, they don't necessarily go the deepest into the bench, but I do like what I'm seeing out of Scotty Middleton, as well as been able to give you 6 points, 5 boards. He was over at Seton in Ohio State, where he saw some very meaningful minutes last 2 seasons. I do think that with Tulane shooting it as well as they are from 3, and Boston College just really not doing a great job around the perimeter, that Tulane finds a way to be able to get the job done here. Set my line at a 3.5. I'm going to be willing to take Tulane on the money line. So I told 144.5. I'm in on the over. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. Also from Charleston, this is 685-686, Utah State and Davidson to battle. And Davidson right now finds themselves as a 7.5 to an 8.5 point underdog. Total on this game is 148.5 to 149.5. Now Davidson should have a little bit of a crowd on their side, and this is for Utah State quite a trek to be able to get out there to Charleston. But this is a nice late night game, so that actually helps out Utah State quite a bit. And I did make Utah the 8.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay with the Aggies with Utah State. They've gotten great production out of MJ Collins, who was a rock-solid player over at Vanderbilt last year. He's coming and he's done a bit of everything. 17 points, pair of assists, shooting over 46% from three. With Utah State, they're just running good, clean offense. Top 75 unit in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Top 15 team with regards to their overall field goal shooting percentage, but lost in all of that is the fact that the defense has been really good as well. Now, they are allowing opponents to shoot 35% from three. Tulane shot like 50% from three-point range a few days ago, but that said, they're really denying teams down low. They've been a top 45 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and they're generating 15.5 turnovers per game. As we were talking about with Major Matt, this is a Davidson team looking to play very slow and very controlled outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, and they're burying about 41% of their threes. They're also allowing opponents to shoot 27.5% from distance. That's a number that should be going northward, but Hunter Adam, he's actually been a sixth man for the team, and he's been their top scorer, 12 points per game, since in that neighborhood about 6'7". He's been able to supply the team with about a 56% three-point shooting percentage. Should be going up, as coming into the year he was shooting more like 35% from three, but you got some versatile pieces like Josh Govins, who comes on over from Army. He's been able to give the team like 9 points, 3 boards, not necessarily going to light you up from three, but Sam Brown is a guy that I really liked over at Penn last year. 14 points, pair of assists, shot in the mid-30s from three over at Penn, and he's been able to give this team right around about 8.5 points per contest as well. And Parker Fredrickson, a little bit of a one-trick pony three-point shooter from Wake Forest. He's been able to supply 10 points per game as well, but with this Davidson team, one thing that they don't do, grab offensive rebounds. It's been this way for the last few years. They're outside the top 355 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and for Utah State, they should be able to own the glass, as you've got Carson Templin back from season ago. He's only been able to give you about 4 rebounds per game, but now you've got Gary Clark, who comes on over from Texas A&M Corpus Christi, 9 boards, 13 points, active hands to be able to generate some turnovers. Mason Fosloff, he's one of the top scorers returning from season ago, 14 points, shooting 37% from three-point range, and for Utah State, I do think that they go out there, get the job done, and really win this game from within. Did set a total here of a 150.5. I think that Utah State, in a little bit of a lower tempo game, they're just going to be really, really efficient, and this is a Davidson team that they themselves are a top 115 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, so in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 8 here with Utah State, and now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-501, 306-502 from the great state of Colorado, SIU Edwardsville and Alabama State to battle. Alabama State, a 2.5 to a 4.5 point dog, 140.5 to a 141 is your total, and I said Edwardsville as a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Edwardsville took it on the chin a few days ago when they went up against Air Force, but that said, this has been an Edwardsville team that's been a top 150 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. The offense has been really leaving a little bit of something to be desired. They lose Rayshawn Taylor, that main scorer from a season ago, but Joe Valeria has been rock solid, giving the team 9.6 boards per contest. Ring Malaith, Miles Thompson, they've been able to combine for a little bit under 13 rebounds per game, and you get some nice versatility out of Valeria as well. He's been able to shoot over 46% from three, much cheap for a bunch of that. It's only shooting about 31.5% from the outside, but for this Edwardsville team, last year they were top 75 unit in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and I do think that they're going to take it to an Alabama State team that last year they were really efficient. Alabama State, 8 seasons ago, they were a top 20 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but they lose the coach's son in TJ Madlock, who was really the main guy in terms of facilitating this offense. You've had Micah Simpson and Ashon Anderson, a transfer from Queens NC, really be able to take over the ownership of the backcourt, and these two guys are combined for about 34 points per game. They're combined for about 7.5 assists per game, but turnovers are way up. They're turning the ball over 13 times per contest. Now, they did play against IU Indy a few days ago, and that really drives it up, but even before that, they were turning the ball over about 12 times per game. Now, they're generating turnovers themselves. They're a top 55 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but also shooting 64.5% at the free throw line. Not great going up against an Edwardsville team that's going to be willing to get physical with you. Down low, they're going to leave something to be desired, as well as Cam Polisi, who comes on over from Canius at 6'5", 6'6", 5 boards per contest, is right now leading the way. They've been okay in terms of generating offensive rebounds, but that said, they've been facing off against smaller competition. They've had a game or two against non-D1 teams that has really been able to bolster their numbers, and I do think that for SIU Edwardsville, they win from within. I do think that Alabama State going to be looking to play a little bit more quickly this year. This is an Edwardsville team that last year they were playing a little bit more slowly. Now with having Rayshon Taylor out of the fold, they've had to mix and match a little bit more, but for Alabama State right now in terms of total possessions per game, top 100 team, they are currently 99th, and Edwardsville more on 269th, set a total of 143. I think that they are close enough for late game falling, like the over, and Edwardsville laying the number. 306-603, 306-604. No numbers for this game as Binghamton and Canius do battle. Binghamton played yesterday, and that's the big reason why you don't have any numbers, but that said, I've got my handicap. I did set Binghamton as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to a deuce with them. 3 or more, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Canius, and I did set a total here of a 144.5. So 144 or less and on the over, 145 or higher the under. Binghamton losing to our good friends in Maryland Eastern Shore and being held below 65 points. Not necessarily great there. Going into that game, you had Demetrius Lilly doing a great job down low for the team. 16.5 points, 11.5 boards. He should be a little bit of a dominator, but for this Binghamton team, they just allow for a lot of clean possessions while they themselves have a tough time with regards to turnovers. Binghamton right now turning the ball over about 14 to 15 times per game. They're only generating about 9 turnovers per game. That's well outside the top 300 in all of college basketball, but even though their three-point shooting percentage is below 30%, they're allowing opponents to shoot less than 30% from three-point range. And for Canius, last season, they were a really good three-point shooting team. They were a top 75 unit with regards to their three-point shooting percentage, but they do lose their main guys in the backcourt from a season ago. They sort of have to pick up the pieces after Paul McMillan was a 20-point-per-game scorer, and in the transfer portal, they prioritized bringing in a lot of guys with size. Miles Wilmoth, who over at Siena was able to give that team a block plus per contest. He's been able to do a nice job, giving you about 4 rebounds per game. Brian Jogona, hopefully I said that correct. He's been able to give you 13 points, 5.5 boards. Khalil Singleton, he comes on over from Holy Cross. He gives his team a little bit of three-point shooting last season when he was with the Crusaders, shot about 39.5% for 3, 6.5 points per contest. But that said, this is a bunch that now they leave a little bit more to be desired on offense with the fact that they are turning the ball over 14 times per game. Michael Everbrow, he comes on over after he began his career out there in the Metro Atlantic, and he's been rock solid, 7 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, a little bit of a do-it-all guy, but right now, he's had to be the main facilitator, and I do think that that takes it out of a Canius team that last year they were well outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Looks like they are tracking for that once again this season in a game where you've got a pair of teams that are really not going to be looking to push tempo. Binghamton outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. Canius just 363, but both offenses should be able to benefit from both defenses not being great as well. So one will have to reduce here with Binghamton, 3 or more, taking the points with Canius, and then 144 or less in on the over, 145 or higher the under. 306-605, 306-606. Miami of Ohio is going to be playing us to Arkansas Pine Bluff. And for Pine Bluff, they are an underdog of 21.5 points on this game. It is 160 to 160.5. And for Pine Bluff, I did set them as an underdog here of 24 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Pine Bluff has shown some great fight, and they brought in Keon Williams, who is really a good scorer over there at Abilene Christian last year. He's been able to do a solid job giving this team 15 plus points, 5 boards, a few assists, a few steals, but now they have to match up with a Miami of Ohio team that was last year a top 30 team with regards to their three-point shooting percentage, and they brought back 2 other top 3 scorers from the season ago. Peter Suter, who hasn't even had a great year thus far with 11 points per contest, and Brent Byers was a little bit more of a 6-man scorer. He's now been able to give you 15 points per game. It is a Miami of Ohio team that's going to leave a little bit of something to be desired down low, but how about Ian Elmore and Antoine Woolfolk combining for 15 rebounds per game? It is a Miami of Ohio squad that is outside the top 275 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they're also generating about 15 turnovers per game, and I do think that Arkansas Pine Bluff going to have a little bit of a tough time here because they've been dealing with a few injuries for one, and for two, outside of Keon Williams along with Jaquan Scott. Scott, he was over at UTSA meet for the Roadrunners last year, where in a small sample size, he gave that team like 8 points, 4 boards at 6'8". He was a relatively good three-point shooter for them, and thus far has shot 37.5% from 3. You just don't have a lot outside of that. You're going to be looking to Mion Charles, who's been able to give you 9.5 points per game to be able to elevate his game. Trevon Payton, who comes on up from the non-D1 ranks, he's been able to give you about 10.5 points per game as well, but it's a Pine Bluff team that they're really looking to play a little bit slower than they did a season ago. Last year, top 25 team in terms of total possessions per game, more in that neighborhood, about 80th this season, but they're getting dump trucked down the glass outside the top 300 in terms of rebound percentage, and they're allowing teams to shoot 38.5% from three-point range. That has been a main kryptonite as they gamble for turnovers, and they're still outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So do think that you get a nice expose of scoring, semi-total 162. I like the over, and with Miami of Ohio willing to lay up to 23.5 with them. 306-607, 306-608. Miami, the Miami of Florida, is going to be playing up to Delaware St. Delaware St, an underdog of 34.5 points. 151.5 to 152.5 is the total, and with Delaware St, I did set them as an underdog of 30.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points with them, as with this Miami team, they've been able to do a rock solid job down low. Malik Renew, Ernest Uday, these two guys have been able to combine for over 15 rebounds per game. With Miami, they've also been able to do a good job in terms of winning the turnover battle. They bring in Trey Donaldson, who is a nice piece of the Michigan team from a season ago. He's supplying 16 points, 5.5 assists in the backcourt. True Washington was a really good three-point shooter over at New Mexico last season, and he's been the saving grace for the team from the outside, as Donaldson is shooting 18% from three. Washington, 47% from the outside, 14.5 points, 2.8 steals, 2.5 assists per game, so he's been able to do a tremendous job with that regard. And for this Miami team, they've been quite fortunate with teams only shooting 60.4% at the free throw line against them. That's a number that should very much be going northward, but Miami also a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Do have a Delaware State team that's in quite a bit of transition, but still doing an okay job of taking care of the ball. They've been pretty much playing even up with regards to turnover battle. Don't have quite as much down low as they did a season ago, but you've got Ponce James, and this guy's been a Ponsation. Give you 13.5 points, 4.5 assists per game. Zion Bethea, he was a nice scorer a season ago when he was over at Pepperdine. He stepped in, he's been able to get the team 9 points per game, and then Ademir Santos has been able to shoot over 40% from three. He comes on over from the country of Sweden. Do like the way that these guys are mixing and matching a little bit. Now for Delaware State, what has been a real issue for them is just being able to win the battle in terms of the perimeter, in terms of guarding the three-point line. It seems they're shooting 37.5% from three-point range against them after they were a pretty solid defense a season ago. Now, they're not allowing opponents to get a lot of offensive rebounds, and going up against Malik Renew and company, that's going to be put to the test, but I mean, they've been a top 50 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. That said, for Delaware State, I do think that they're really up against it with this Miami team down low, but I think that they do just enough to be able to hold in there. Did set a total of a 162.5. This is a Miami team that has been quite efficient, top 55 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and this is traditionally a Delaware State team that really does like to run. Right now, they're 343rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Do think that that is very much going to be sped up here as the season goes along, so like the over and the points here with Delaware State. 306-609, 306-610. Maine hopes to not get Maine, as they're going to be playing us Brown, and what can Brown do for you? Well, if they win this game, they'll make you some money. They're 1 to 1.5 point favorites. Totals between 125.5 to 126.5, and it's at a total here of a 134.5. I am in on the over. Brown looked a little bit better on offense a few days ago, but still, they had Alex Lesbert enter into the transfer portal pretty much towards the start of the season, and for Landon Lewis, he was their main man from a season ago. They just recently got him back at the fold, 13.6 rebounds in his first action, but even with that, I do like Maine here outright on the money line. I did set them as a 2.5 point favorite. Getting back Lewis, who averaged 13.5 points per contest a season ago, is big, but it's still a team that has to replace Keno Lilly Jr. from the backcourt, and they've been turning the ball over 13.5 times per game, while they themselves don't generate a lot of turnovers with regards to their defense either. Now for Brown, even though they were dealing with Landon Lewis being out for a little bit of time, this is still a good shot blocking team. Nafama Dabo has been able to give you 2.8 blocks per contest, 10.8 rebounds per game, and Jeremiah Jenkins, he's been able to do a little bit of everything in terms of being the point guard, 6.5 assists, 4.5 boards, 9.5 points, but also 4 turnovers per game, and this is the main team that when under Chris Markwood, they've been firing all cylinders. They've been really good in terms of being able to generate turnovers. They do lose much of that backcourt from a season ago, so leaving a little bit more to be desired than in past years. Right now, they are outside the top 200 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, holding teams shooting 23% for three. That is going to be going northward, but they did bring in a little bit of toughness with TJ Beal, who began his career over at Southeast Missouri State. He's been able to supply the team with 13 points, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range. I like the fact that you bring in Makai Gray as well. He began his career over at NJIT and UMass Lowell, and last year he was just unable to get out there on the floor at UMass Lowell, dealt with injury 2 years ago as a starter at NJIT, 10 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists, a little bit over a steal per contest, so I do think that he's going to be able to fit that Markwood style pretty solidly, and for Maine, this has been traditionally a team that's gotten just completely dump trucked on the glass, but they've got a little bit more size this year. You've got Ace Flagg, that is the brother of Cooper Flagg, giving you about 4.5 boards, 5.5 points per game. You've got Keegan Steele, a 6'10" big man that was over in the country of Canada, and he's in season number 2 in this program, been able to give you some rock solid production. He's right now giving you 4 boards, block and a half per contest, and he's able to generate a little bit over steal per game. Not really a guy that's going to light it up from 3, and Maine has never really been a great team in terms of shooting it from 3, and Maine traditionally is a very low-tempo team, but that said, I think that we've gone a little bit too far downward with regards to this total, as you've got a Brown team that right now is about 307th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but should speed up now that you've got Landon Lewis back in the fold. Maine is right around about 321st, but both of these defenses have taken a little bit of setback from where they were a season ago, so I did set a total of a 134.5. I do like the over, and Maine outright on the money line. 306-611, 306-612. Longwood is on the road. They're facing off against Columbia, and Columbia does find themselves as a 4.5 point favorite. So this game is 151.5, and with Longwood, I did set them as the 1.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take a shot here on the Lancers on the money line. Less than savory loss that they took to Maryland Eastern Shore a few days ago, but that said, I do think that this team is going to be able to rebound figuratively and literally, as they've been a top 15 team with regards to their offensive rebound percentage, as right now they're grabbing about 15 offensive rebounds per game. You got Jacoy Hutchinson, who was averaging about 7 points per game over at George Washington a season ago. He's going out 3.5 assists. He's been able to up that to about 14 points per game here with Longwood, and right now Longwood is shooting 23.7% from 3. This is not an amazing 3-point shooting team, but they should be doing better than that. Really, the lone guy that's been able to knock down threes has been Jonah Nazemi, who's been able to come in after he was a relatively solid player for them a season ago. A 6th man that averaged 9 points, 4.5 boards a season ago. Right now shooting 42% for 3. I think that there's a little bit of regression to be had there, but he's also been able to pull in there 6.5 rebounds per game. Emmanuel Richards, he's back after he a season ago was once again a nice priority reserve, 5.5 points. Never has been a great 3-point shooter, but he'll pull in there a few boards. He'll generate a steal per game, and I do think that Longwood is going to do a solid job against a Columbia team that might have a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball against a Lancers unit that has been in the top 25 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and for Columbia, that's really been the issue for them. They're only generating 9 turnovers per game. That's outside the top 340 in all of college basketball, and they themselves have been turning the ball over about 15 times per game, despite being outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game. They've been playing a little bit slowly under Kevin Hovde. He comes over after he was an assistant over at Florida. I think that a little bit of this is a byproduct of the teams that they played this far, as they played against New Haven. UConn is a really, really good offensive team, but they're not necessarily an up-tempo team. They played against Boston U, so I do think that tempo goes up a little bit more, and this team should be able to do a nice job down low. You've got Ryan Solis, who provides 6'10" size with about 4 boards per contest. Blair Thompson has been in the program for a while, 6.6 boards, and he's able to pop it from 3-point. And Zanu Endi Bedri, he's been as a 6'9" big man who comes over from Algeria, give you 7.5 rebounds per game. The passing of the torch in terms of point guard spot, a little bit TBD at this point, because last year it was Geronimo Rubio de la Rosa doing a little bit of everything. Now you've got Kenny Nolan as the top scorer, give you 15.5 points per game, but really nobody that's giving you over 2.5 assists per game. That's a big reason why they've been turning the ball over so much, and I do think that plays into the hands of Longwood, and I do think that this Columbia team is going to be cranking out up tempo a little bit more. So set a total of 155.5, like the over, and Longwood on the money line. 306-613, 306-614. Central Arkansas is going to be playing us to Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington, a 6.5 point favorite. Your total on this game, it is 156.5 with Eastern Washington. I only set them as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Central Arkansas. They're a much improved team, in my opinion, from a season ago. They're still right around about 103rd the country in terms of total possessions per game, and they're going to leave something to be desired on defense, but Cameron Hunter, 3 seasons ago, he was really good for the Central Arkansas team, where he was giving the team 15 points, doing a good job doling out good, clean offense. He missed a year due to injury, was just unable to get out there on the floor over at Wisconsin. He's back, and he's giving the team 14 points per game. Central Arkansas should see some positivity to the fact that they're shooting 25% from 3. Now, they're not a great 3-point shooting team. You bring back someone like Javon Guy King, who he last season supplied this team with 7 points per contest, actually 2 seasons ago, because he was injured last year, but he was still shooting 24% from 3-point range. Not sure if he's going to be able to give you a ton there. Ty Robinson, he was limited due to injury last season himself. He's been able to get out there, give you 10.5 points per game, so you've got a lot of guys that are dealing with the ailment that are back, but Cole McCormick seems to have taken a little bit of setback after he has a 6'6", a little bit of a combo player and a starter last year. Gave the team 8 points, shot about 33% for 3, down to about 7 points per contest here to begin this season. And on the other end, for Eastern Washington, after they were just awful against the spread last season, they've been much more respectable this year in year number 2 under Dan Monson, as they bring back Simon Marquette, Marquette, who has been able to give you about 8 points per contest. I really like what I've been seeing out of Isaiah Moses, the main transfer that came on over in the offseason. He's been able to fly this team with 18.5 points per game over at UC Riverside last year. He was a nice double-figure scorer for them. And then Kyrie Huey, he's been able to give you some rebounding after, at Idaho State 2 seasons ago, he was like a 7 rebound per game guy. Last year, he was just glued to the bench over at Miami. He's been able to give this team a little bit more rough and tumble that they haven't had in past years, but this is still a team, even with Huey in the fold, that they're well outside the top 320 in terms of their percentage of missed shots, their result in an offensive rebound, and this is still a team that is really getting lit up on defense for Eastern Washington outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, allowing teams to shoot over 40% from three. That should go downward a little bit, but even last year they were a pretty wretched defense. Got a Central Arkansas team that's not quite playing as fast as they have in past seasons, so I did set a little bit of a lower total here at a 155.5. I do think that you see a little bit of regression with that Eastern Washington three-point shooting defense, but I think that Central Arkansas holds in there on the glass, so I'm going to be one take the points with Central Arkansas. I set my line at 3.5, and at a 156 or higher, I'm in on the under. 3-6-6-15, 3-6-6-16. You've got South Dakota, and they're going to be playing us South Carolina State. You've got South Dakota right now is an 11.5 to a 12-point favorite. Total on this game, it is 163.5. With South Dakota, I did set them as a favorite here of 16.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Doesn't sound like much, but South Dakota's up to about 230th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Last year, they were outside the top 340 with this regard, and it's big that they bring back their 7-footer in Cameron Fentz, who got injured midseason last year. He's been able to get the team a little bit over a block, 8 points, 5 rebounds per game, so he's been able to help out in the post for a South Dakota team that's right now a top 75 unit in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and they're generating 16 turnovers per game. That's big going because a South Carolina State team that has always been built on depth, has always been built around just having like a 9 or 10 man rotation, and they lost darn near all of it last season. You lose pretty much 7 out of your top 8 scorers, so now you're relying upon Jaden Johnson to really run the show, and he was a little bit of a facilitator last year, up to about 3.8 assists per game, but it's never been too much of a scorer. He, Noah Treadwell, James Morrow, your main guys returning from a season ago, all three of them giving you about 7.5 to 8.5 points per contest. It's actually been Owen Bronson Jr., who's come in as a non-D1 guy who's been able to give you 12 points per contest to really lead the way, but just not a lot down low. This has been a unit that has been well outside the top 325 in terms of rebound percentage. They are getting absolutely dump truck down low with opponents shooting over 61% on their twos. That's outside the top 325 as well. And then the 17 turnovers per game, that has been a big issue for this team as well, as they just don't have the same facilitation that they had a season ago. They're getting to the free throw line, but they're shooting 61% at the free throw line as well, and you do have a pair of teams that are going to be very much looking to push pace. Last year, South Dakota was a top 5 team in terms of total possessions per game. They've slowed themselves down a little bit from a season ago. Now they're clocking in more than their neighbor at about 28th, and for South Carolina State, 81st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so did set a little bit of a higher total here. I did set mine at a 164.5, so right now seeing the 163.5, I'm in on the over, and I'm going to lay it with the Coyotes. 306-617, 306-618. You've got Georgia Tech playing us West Georgia. West Georgia, a 16.5 to a 17.5 point dog. 144.5 is the total, and with West Georgia, I did set them here as an underdog of 17.5 points, so at a 17 or less, I'm willing to lay it with Georgia Tech. Right now seeing mostly 16.5. With Georgia Tech, this is actually a top 8 team right now in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. The offense has left a lot to be desired, as right now they're shooting 31.5% from 3. They're outside the top 300 in terms of 2-point shooting percentage, even though you got Bate and Don't Go Back, who's been rock solid. 12 points, 7 boards, steal and half, block and half per contest, so like what he's bringing to the table. And for this Georgia Tech team, all of your top 5 scorers are shooting between 33.3 and 37.5% from 3-point range, so a lot of equals there. Kawasi Reeves has been the main guy, being able to give you about 12.5 points per game, but for the Georgia Tech team, the turnovers have been an issue. They lose their main point guard in Nathan George in the offseason, 16 turnovers per game, but they're also generating 16 turnovers per game. Now, they are allowing teams to only shoot about 23.5% from 3-point range. I think that they could be a solid 3-point shooting defense. I don't think that it's going to be necessarily that great, though. And then with this West Georgia unit, you've got Dave Moore's team looking a little bit more respectable this year with the fact that they do bring back some of their guys from year number 1, the D1 ranks. You've got a guy in Colton Griffin who's been able to give you 8 points, 3.5 assists per game, and Chaz Lawless has been able to do a nice job as just a little bit of a do-it-all guard coming on over from San Diego. 11 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, and Sheldon Williams-Dryden, he's that main guy, and it looked like he was going to transfer to UW Green Bay in the offseason, decided to come back, and they're glad that he did. 18.5 points, 10 boards, a steal per contest, so he's been able to do a nice job in terms of just providing a little bit of this and that for a West Georgia team that's right now shooting 41% from 3. Again, we should see a lot of regression with that regard, and West Georgia has been a little bit more respectable on the glass, still outside the top 225 in terms of rebound percentage, not really forcing the issue in terms of generating a lot of turnovers, but I do think that this is going to be a little bit more controlled game. This is a Georgia Tech team that has been doing a very rock-solid job with regards to their defense. This is a West Georgia team that they're not going to be necessarily looking to fly. They're not as slow as they were a season ago, but about 193rd in terms of total possessions per game. So set a total of 143.5, like the under, and with Georgia Tech, willing to lay up to 17 with them. 3-6-6-19, 3-6-6-20. You've got Oklahoma, and they're going to be playing us Alcorn St. And Alcorn St. finds themselves as a very big underdog of 29.5 to 30.5 points. 163.5 to 162.5 is the total line. Set a total of 163. I would rather have a 162.5 over rather than a 163.5 under, because you do have an Alcorn St. team that has really been giving it up on defense, outside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Mid-tempo team as of right now under Jake Morton, who he was an assistant over at Florida State last year, 165th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and you've got a really explosive Oklahoma backcourt that, I mean, they're about 125th in terms of total possessions per game, a little bit faster than they have been in the past, and Alcorn St. they themselves have a guy in Shayton Lancaster who has come up. He's been able to give the team 12 points per contest. He's shooting 56% from 3. I don't think that that's going to be withstanding. Actually began his career in Iger before going down for a year or two to the non-D1 ranks, but Alcorn St as a whole, they're shooting 37.5% from the outside. They're going to get absolutely plowed on glass. I recognize that Oklahoma doesn't have a lot of size, but it's Alcorn St team outside the top 325 in terms of rebound percentage. Mohamed Wagyu with his 6'10" size, 5+ rebounds. He should be able to own the battle down there. Jerrion Reed, I think, is going to be rock solid as well. Hasn't quite developed the way that I would have liked to have seen thus far, but that said, you've got Nigel Pack and Xavier Brown, who have been able to combine for about 36 points per game. Between these two guys, about 5.5 assists per contest. Pack is packing it in at 50% from 3. That should see a little bit of regression, but I also like the game of Tay Davis. Began his career over at Seton Hall in Notre Dame, and Notre Dame last year was just a little bit of this and that guy that did a bit of everything. 15 points, 5 boards, 2 assists, shot about 30% from 3-point range. I think that he's going to be able to do a rock-solid job for this unit, and when it's all said and done, I do think that Oklahoma is going to be able to take it to an Alcorn St team that's just really giving it up on defense, and for Oklahoma, very efficient on offense. Only turned the ball over about 10 times per contest, so you're at a 162.5, like the over, and for Oklahoma, I'm willing to lay up to 32.5 with them. 3-6-6-21, 3-6-6-22. You've got Duke, and they're going to be playing us Howard. Howard is a massive underdog here of 39.5 points, 150.5 is the total, and I did set a line here of 37.5. I'm going to be one take the points with Howard. This is a brotherhood run, and I do think that Duke is going to show a little bit of mercy at the end of the game for this Howard team. It's a Howard bunch that had a nice rally to be able to come back against Niagara, so they are going to be playing in a back-to-back after they won that game yesterday, but I mean, it's all about Bryce Harris. He's been able to get the team 22 points, 7 boards, 3.5 assists per contest. Absolutely love what he's bringing to the table, and we've got a few ancillary guards. Cam Gillis, he was over at Lehigh last season, and over at Lehigh, he was giving that team about 10 points per contest. He's been able to do relatively the same here for this bunch, and then you've been able to have just a little bit of mixing and shaking for a team that just does not have a lot of size down low. This is a Howard team that they only have like one guy that is above 6'6" that is seeing meaningful minutes, but that said, when you've got Harris being able to pull on the boards that he does, that's pretty rock solid, and Osei Okoji is going to be a big piece for this team as well. He had 13 points yesterday overall for this team. He's been able to supply as a 6'5", a little bit of a do-it-all guard, about 8 points per game. And then for Duke, you've got the Boozer brothers, who are going to be able to continue to completely dominate this, as Cameron Boozer has been able to give you over 20 points, over 8 rebounds. He's able to pop it from 3-point range. And then Isaiah Evans, he hasn't necessarily been as efficient with his 3-point shot as he was a season ago. Last year shot 41.5% from 3, down to 37.5% this season, but he's flying 13.5 points per game. You've been able to have Caden Boozer actually give out 3.5 assists per game as well, so you've got a lot of depth. Malik Brown is a nice defensive stopper. Patrick Ngogba, he's been able to do a nice job in terms of being able to get this team right around about 7 rebounds per game. Howard, going into the day on Saturday, was outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that they're going to be looking to crank it up a little bit more. This is a Duke team that traditionally is actually quite slow under John Shire, and right now this season they're about 189th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but Duke back to being a top 10 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Howard traditionally outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so do think that you get a high scoring expose. Semi-total 155.5. I like the over at 38 plus. We'll take those points with Howard. 36-6-23, 36-6-24. Montana is going to be playing us to Lamar, and Lamar does find themselves as the underdog of 6.5 points. Total is 151.5, and with Lamar, I did set them as an underdog of 7.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay with Montana. Montana has money on their side. Money Williams, who is such a big part of them being able to knock off UNLV about a week and a half ago. He's been able to supply 20.5 points, 5 boards, 6 assists per game, and it's just all about what you're going to be be able to get around them, as you've had quite a few guys step up with between 9 and 11 points per game. Tyler Isaac, Tayshawn Sawyer, along with Keenan Aguino, and with Aguino and Sawyer. Both of these guys are 6'7", 6'8" combo players. They're able to give you a little bit of outside shooting, though they don't necessarily shoot at the world's greatest from three-point range. It is a Montana team that year in and year out, they just don't generate offensive rebounds. They're back outside the top 300 with regards to the percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they're doing a great job guarding the perimeter. They're allowing teams to shoot less than 30% from three-point range after being outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis last season. They're doing a little bit of a better job there, and now you've got a Lamar team that is going to be very much looking to be able to base themselves down low. Andrew Holyfield at 6'10", 5 boards, 16.5 points per game. He's actually able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range throughout his career. He's up over 40% this season. Should see a little bit of regression there for Lamar. They're doing a nice job winning the turnover battle. They've been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they're also allowing opponents to shoot about 38% from three. They've been much weaker around the perimeter with regards to their defense and down low, even though you bring back a guy like a Cody Penbaker, who at 6'5", nice versatility. Last season gave that team about 7 points, 4 boards, a steal per contest. Not necessarily a great three-point shooter, but he's able to do a nice job in terms of being able to guard multiple positions. And then you have Ariel White back from a season ago as well, where he was averaging about 4 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. He's actually been having a little bit of a tougher time down low for this Lamar team, and for Lamar, they've been relatively untested to this point, as they have played against a non-Division I team, Louisiana Monroe, and then they took it on the chin a little bit when they went up against TCU. So just game number 4 of the season with Montana getting those reps in, with Montana having the backcourt that they do. I do think that they find a way to be able to persevere here. Both of these teams relatively mid-tempo, so I set my total at a 147.5. I like the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 7 here with Montana. 3-6-6-25, 3-6-6-26. Wyoming is playing us in Norfolk State. Norfolk State, a 10.5 point underdog. Total on this game, it is 139.5. Set Wyoming as a 10-point favorite. So here at 10.5, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Norfolk State. We've got a Wyoming team that's really looking to crank up their tempo, and a Norfolk State team that is really looking to slow it down. For Norfolk State, they're traditionally a more mid-tempo team, but right now for Norfolk State, 348th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for Wyoming last year, they were very slow in control. They're up to 50th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so makes this total very interesting. I did set mine a little bit north of a 140 at a 142, so I'm going to be in on the over. I think that this has a propensity to be close enough for late game fouling, and you do have Nasir Meyer and Leland Walker doing a nice job in the backcourt. Meyer is a true freshman. Walker is a guy that comes in from Eastern Kentucky. They're combining for about 32 points per contest. Walker has been that main facilitator with 4.5 assists per game, and he's given this team just a little bit more of an ability to be able to generate turnovers after Wyoming really struggled to be able to do that a season ago. It is a Wyoming team that has also been able to do a great job on the offensive glass. This is a top 45 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. That said, with Wyoming, they're also allowing teams to shoot less than 26% from three-point range, and certainly that's going to be going northward a little bit. You've got a Norfolk State unit that brings in Anthony McComb, who is a very nice double-figure scorer. A season ago when he was over at New Hampshire, gave that team over 12 points per contest. Right now, he's shooting 37.5% from the outside, and with this Norfolk State team, last year they had a little bit of a tough time on the glass, but this year they're allowing a lot of defensive rebounds, but they themselves are grabbing a lot of offensive boards. They're grabbing 14.5 offensive rebounds per game, and it's a whole is greater than the sum of its parts approach with regards to rebounding. You got essentially 4 different guys give you between 4.3 and 4.8 rebounds per game. Keontae Lewis, who's been a little bit around the block, began his career over at Wagner at 6'1". He's a guy that's not afraid to get his nose dirty. You've been able to have Devin Ellis, 6'6" combo player from Maryland Eastern. Shorby Solid and Elijah Jamison, who was missing pretty much all last season due to injury. 2 years ago over at UW Milwaukee, was a 9-point per game scorer. He's been able to breathe a little bit of life into this program as well. So I do think they get a little bit more scoring here, and I think that Norfolk State knocks down just enough threes to be able to hold in there. I did set my total at a 142. I like the over, and at 10.5 plus, we'll take those points with Norfolk State. 3-6-6-27, 3-6-6-28. George Washington, our nation's first president, is going to be playing against McNeese. This is a neutral court game where George Washington is a 5 to 5.5 point favorite. 152 to 152.5 is the total, and with our nation's first president, I set him as a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the number. It's a George Washington team that just has 2 of everything. We talked about this a little bit with our good friend Mid-Major Matt, but you bring back Garrett Johnson, who 2 years ago was a nice solid double-figure scorer, missed the first few games of the season, but he's reacclimating. You've got 6'7" Tyrone Marshall, who does a bit of everything, 10.6 boards per contest. Rafael Castro, big man down low, is able to give you 8.5 rebounds per game. Trey Dinkins was a nice scorer over at Duquesne. He, Boo Boo Benjamin, and Christian Jones have all come into the program, have all been able to give you between 11 and 12.5 points per game. And it's a George Washington team that has been really good defensively as well. Teams are shooting less than 27% from three-point range against them, which that should be going northward a little bit, but they've also been a top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And it's a George Washington team that it feels like they're embracing the 40 minutes of HE double hockey sticks style, as they're about 92nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So it's not like they're just completely gunning it or anything like that, but they're looking to play a little bit more up-tempo. And then you've got a McNeese team that they do have some of the holdovers from the era of Will Wade. And for McNeese, last season they were a very nice, slow and controlled team, and they're back to doing that once again. They're about 300th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And both of these teams, I think, are going to be rock-solid defenses when it's all said and done. George Washington right now 24th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. McNeese just 149th, but it's a very small sample size after last year. They were in the top 50 with that regard. They had a little bit of a tough go of it against Santa Clara in their first game against a D1 team, but that said, for McNeese, you do have a guy in Gawari Duel, who I think has quite a bit of upside. Duel was a former top 50 recruit, and he's been a little bit of a do-it-all guy to begin the season. 8 points, 5.5 assists per contest. You bring in Larry Johnson, no relation to the former Chiefs running back, who's been able to give this team 24 points per contest. He's actually a former top 100 recruit. I don't think that he's going to quite be able to continue to give you 24 points per contest, but I mean, he's been rock solid. And then Javon Garcia, along with DJ Turn It Up Richards, are your main two guys that returned from his season ago. Garcia was a starter for the team last year, 12.5 points, 3.5 boards, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, and then you got a guy in Richards who last year was able to be a nearly 40% three-point shooter. And with McNeese, they're doing a great job on the turnover battle. They've been generating 19.5 turnovers per game, albeit a game or two against non-Division I competition. But that said, I do think that just the overall depth of this George Washington team is going to be able to win out in this ordeal. So I did set my line at 7. I'm going to be willing to lay with George Washington. Do think that you get a little bit more of a defensive expose here as well. Set my total at a 149. I like the under. 3 of 6, 629, 3 of 6, 630. Furman is going to be playing against the Queens NC. Queens NC is a 6 to a 6.5 point dog. 158.5 to 159.5 is the total. And with Queens NC, I did set them as a underdog here, 5.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Furman. It's been a really rough start to the season for them, and I do think that things are going to get better, but they lose that game by 25 plus to High Point. They get absolutely bludgeoned by Northern Iowa. Nice bounce back win against a non-D1 team, but that's a non-D1 team. And right now for this Furman team, they've been looking to a little bit of a new look backcourt with Alex Wilkins, a true freshman, really being the head of the snake. 3.5 assists, 14.5 points per game. They lose PJ Smith, that top scorer from a season ago. Now you do return a lot of your size. Cooper Bowser, Charles Johnson. Both of these guys are between 6'10", 6'11", with Bowser 10.7 boards per contest, and then Johnson, he's been a double-double machine. 10.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. He's able to let it fly from three, but it's right now shooting less than 30% from three. And for Furman, they should see some positivity with the fact that they're shooting 25.6% from three-point range. That includes their 2 games against non-D1 competition. This is a Furman team that year in and year out under Bob Ritchie, they just have really good shooters in general. So I do think that that is going to be rebounding as coach, but this is a Queens NC team that is built pretty tough. I do like the fact that you got a backcourt that involves a lot of guys that are back from a season ago, like Chris Ashby and Yov Berman. They've been able to combine for 30 points and 5 assists per game between the two of them. It is a Queens NC team that once again is having a tough time with turnovers, outside the top 225 in terms of ball security, and they don't have quite as much as they did down low a season ago. Malcolm Brown was averaging over 3 blocks per contest, so they do have to replace that. Right now they're outside the top 225 in terms of rebound percentage. That said, you do have a guy in Nasir Man who's been able to do a bit of everything. 2.5 assists, some boards, 14 points per game, shoots about 30 or so percent from three-point range. Carson Schwieger is a guy that comes in after he was over at Valparaiso, was a bit of a reserve for them. He's able to give you a bit of size. He's been able to throw in there about 4 boards per contest. And Gus Larson is another guy that has relatively good size, comes on over from California, was never really able to get out there on the floor at his previous stops, but he's coming off of a season where he was off the floor last year due to injury. He's come back. He's been able to get the same 5 points, 3.5 boards per game, and I do think that Queens NC does a rock solid job down low. I think that things are going to be very much up and down. Queens NC, a top 75 team in terms of total possessions per game, but again, this Furman team just has not shot it well this season, so I set a total of 157.5. You're at the 158.5 to 159.5, like the under, and the points with Queens NC. 3 of 6, 631, 3 of 6, 632. You've got Bryant on the road against UConn. Connecticut is a 37 to a 37.5 point favorite. 143.5 is the total, and My line 40, I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Bryant. I do like the fact that they brought in Jamie Christian as their new coach. He was pretty rock solid when he was at Mount St. Mary's. Had a little bit of a tough go of it over at George Washington, but this is a backcourt that's in a lot of transition. Timofey Radovsky, he's a true freshman that comes in from the country of Moscow, spent a little bit of time in Arizona before acclimating to the college game, but he's been able to get the team 13 points, 2.5 assists per game, and he's the main facilitator for a Bryant team that is outside the top 275 in terms of ball security and shooting just 24% from three. I think that goes a little bit northward, but they didn't really prioritize a lot of offense when they set up this roster. You've got a guy in Keegan Harvey who was actually recruited by Christian over at George Washington, 6'11", big man, just could never really get out there on the floor for them, but he's been able to give you about 3 to 4 rebounds per game. Quincy Allen is a former top 175 recruit that has just bounced around, has dealt with so many injuries throughout his career, but now he's fully healthy. He's been able to give this team 10.5 points, 5.5 boards, good versatility, but again, a career about 24% three-point shooter, and you got a UConn team that might be without Torres Reed. Once again, he was missing in that game against Arizona. No need to rush him back against Bryant, but that said, you still have Solo Bowles giving you 15 points per contest. Last year shot 40% from three. Currently, he's only shooting about 26% from the outside. That should progress, and Alex Caravan shooting 62% from three should regress, but he's been rock solid, part of those national title team, 16 points, 5 rebounds per game. He does it all at 6'8". It's a UConn team that currently, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, is a top 40 unit. They're always finding themselves towards the top with that regard, and for UConn, they're shooting themselves 38.5% from three, even with a few guys struggling a little bit. Silas Demery was a really nice pickup coming on over from Georgia, and he's become their main facilitator, giving out 5.5 assists per game. Though Malachi Smith, he's been coming off the bench for Dayton. He's been a nice ancillary, shall we say, facilitator with about 4 assists per game. UConn's taking great care of the ball, only turned the ball over about 10 times per contest, and it's going to be really interesting to see what sort of tempo you get moving forward out of this Bryant team, as Jamie Christian seems have been a little bit of a mixed bag right now with this Bryant team, about 233rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. UConn typically actually likes to play very, very slow and controlled, even though they're quite efficient on the offensive side of things. Right now, UConn about 252nd in terms of total possessions per game. Did set a total year of a 146. I think that UConn is able to get a lot of just open looks in general, so like the over, and with UConn willing to lay up to 40 with them. 3 of 6, 633, 3 of 6, 634. Marshall is going to be playing against Mercyhurst. Mercyhurst is a 12.5 to a 13.5 point dog. 152.5 is the total. Semi-line at a 16. I'm going to be willing to lay with Marshall. Marshall should be able to control things down low. Matthew Van Komen, he's a 7'4" big man that was over at Elon last season, giving that team 2.3 blocks per contest. He comes in and he gives this team a lot of rough and tumble down low. It is a Marshall team that has actually had a little bit of a tough time on glass, outside the top 155 in terms of their rebound percentage, but right now, they're lighting it up at 40% three-point shooting. Wyatt Fricks has been the big reason why. Fricks is right now giving you a really freaking good 48% three-point shooting with 16 points per game, so that's been rock solid. And then you've got Jalen Spear, who's been spearheading things. He is back from a season ago. Had a rough go of it to begin last season, but in conference play, he was able to ascend, and he's been able to lead that into giving the team 12.5 points, 7 assists per game. Now, the big thing for Marshall has been the turnovers. 16 turnovers per game, outside the top 20 in terms of ball security. This is not a Mercyhurst team that is going to get after it and generate a bunch of turnovers. So it is a Mercyhurst team that overall has been a top 175 unit in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but a little bit of that is byproduct of playing some rough competition to begin the season. You've got Kadir Martin, who I like what he's been able to do. He's been able to give the team 2 blocks, a steal. He's throwing in there about 8 points per game, and he's been able to give this team a little bit more down low, but he's undersized at 6'5". You've got Michaelis Ivanauskis at 6'8", is able to give you a little bit of three-point ability, 10.6 rebounds per game, but Bernie Blunt is really that main guy that returns from a season ago. 17 points, 2 assists, pretty rock-solid three-point shooter at 36%. And Mercyhurst, they've been holding teams to shoot only 26.5% from three. They've always been a relatively okay team around the perimeter. I do think that they're going to take it on the chin down low, though, and with this Mercyhurst team, I do think that they're going to have a tough time just dealing with the overall size of Van Komen and company, so I did set this line at a 16. I'm going to be willing to lay with Marshall. Marshall's been playing a little bit more up-tempo, but that said, I do think that this is going to be a defense-oriented game. Mercyhurst outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, set a total of 144. I'm in on the under, 3 of 6, 635, 3 of 6, 636. Jackson State is going to be playing against Winthrop. Winthrop is in favorite of 8.5 to 9 points on the road. 165.5 is the total, and did set a total of a 158. I'm going to be in on the under. Now, Jackson State has just been getting drum truck time and time again. The only team that they did not lose to by over 30 points thus far this season is Louisiana Tech, but they have also played the Monstars. They have played against Auburn, they had to play against Arkansas, they have played against some really, really good competition, and you do have a nice backcourt for this team. You have a trio of guys that are back from a season ago, Jamie Mitchell, Dorian McMillan, and Deshaun Ruffin. Ruffin is really your main facilitator, began his career over at Ole Miss with 3 assists per contest, and for this bunch. The big key is they have been getting completely dump trucked down low. They're a bottom 5 team in terms of rebound percentage. They've been dealing with a few ailments with the likes of Dejani Thomas, who comes in from within the conference, and you've also had Kavion Hunt, who was a nice guard for the team 8 seasons ago. He's dealing with injury as well, so that's been a big reason why they've been suffering here to begin the season. But right now, you don't have a single guy that's giving you over 4 rebounds per game. But with Winthrop, they're in quite a bit of transition as well. I do like the fact that you bring in from Duquesne a really nice guard in Kareem Dozier. He's been able to give you 4.5 assists, 15 points per game, and he's right now shooting a little bit over 40% from 3-point range. Winthrop has always prided themselves on getting to the free throw line, and last season they shot under 68% of the charity stripe. They've been able to right that ship with Dalen Berry coming over from Charleston Southern, 16.5 points, 5 boards, and the team as a whole still shooting 74% at the charity stripe. That said, with this Winthrop team, they're also a team that has taken a little bit of a setback on the glass. Last year, you were able to have Caden Telford do a really good job down low, giving that team over 7 rebounds per game. And you still have Logan Duncombe, who at 6'9", is able to give you about 5 boards per contest, but he and Dalen Berry are the lone 2 guys on the roster who are giving you over 3.2 rebounds per game. So both of these teams have some similar issues down low, and that's resulted in Winthrop being outside the top 300 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They are shooting 38% from 3-point range, but Jackson State has the guards, in my opinion, to be able to hold in there. Jamie Mitchell being able to give you 14 points per contest, and even someone like a Tamarian Hoover has been able to give you 9.5 points per game in the small sample size that he's played. He's a guy that returns from the season ago, has dealt with a little bit of ailment, and he's only been able to get out there for 2 games, but he did return in that Arkansas game. That should be big for this Jackson State team, and do think they can get a little bit more of an under with the way that I think that both of these teams guard the perimeter, and I think that Jackson State and the fact that they aren't going to be completely bludgeoned inside allows them to hold in their semi-line at a 8, so at 8.5 plus, we'll take those points, and I'm going to be in on this total under. And then the last 2 games are games without numbers because these were games that were decided based on the results of yesterday. This is from Pensacola, Florida, 306. 637, 306, 638. It is Prairie View taking on North Florida, and I said North Florida is a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3.5 with them. 4.5 or more, I'm going to be willing to take the points here with Prairie View and set a total of 164, 163.5 or less. I'm in on the over 164.5 or higher, the under. This is a Prairie View team that does a great job in terms of generating turnovers. They, in 5 out of the last 9 years, have been a top 10 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and you know that that's going to be a constant for them, and Prairie View always likes to play up tempo. They entered in the day on Saturday, 43rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. North Florida is a team that's 79th in the country, and North Florida, always a team that gives it up from 3-point range. They were well outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage last season, and really both of these teams have their issues with regards to defense. For Prairie View, they do a great job with turnovers, but they get absolutely bludgeoned down low with North Florida right now, 357th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But I do think that even though you're going to get a high possession game, it is going to be a little bit sloppier with the fact that Prairie View, they themselves have been turning the ball over about 13 times per game. Now, I love the fact that you bring in Terrion Joseph. He, 2 seasons ago over at Southern, was able to supply that team with 20 points per game. He's been able to give the team 18 plus points per contest, and they're a little bit better on the glass than they have been in past years. Marcel Bryant, who gave the team 8 plus rebounds per game, he's back, and Corey Wells, he comes over after he was over at Utah Valley last season, had a tough time getting out there on the floor, but he's been able to provide 6'7" size. He's giving you 5 plus rebounds per game, and for North Florida, I do think that this game being played in the great state of Florida is going to be able to help them out. Pensacola not too far from their campus, so that's a little bit of a booster for them. And for North Florida, even though they are dealing with quite a bit of transition in the backcourt, you still do have a Maine holdover from a season ago that's been able to give you double figures, and Kareem Oriole, he's been able to give you 20.5 points per contest, and then it's been the Plummer, BJ Turner Plummer, who as a freshman has been able to breathe a little bit of life into the team as well. Right now shooting over 50% from 3, that'll go downward, but he's been able to give you about 9 points per contest. Devin Hines is someone that began his career out there in the Patriot League, was limited to 8 games at Lafayette last season. 2 seasons ago, he was giving that team about 10 points, 4 boards. Not an amazing 3-point shooter, career about 31% 3-point shooter, but he does add a little bit to the backcourt as well. And I do think that with this North Florida team being a team that's relatively solid in terms of taking care of the ball, they do get the job done here on the money line. Set them to where a 3.5 or less will play with North Florida, 4.5 or more. Prairie View is what I'm going to be taking there, and then 163.5 or less in on the over, 164.5 higher the under. And we're going to wrap things up with 306, 639, 306, 640. Also from Pensacola, you've got Southern Miss, and they're going to be taking on UT Martin. I say UT Martin as a 4.5 point favorite, so willing to lay up to 4 with them, 5 or more. I'm going to be taking those points with Southern Miss, and then set a total of 152.5 for 152 or less, and on the over 153 or higher the under. UT Martin does have one kryptonite. That is the fact that they turn the ball over a ton. They are outside the top 350 in terms of ball security. You do have a Southern Miss team, though, that they're not necessarily the world's greatest team with regards to their defense. Entered in the day on Saturday, 288th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Good news is they are out of the Andre Curbello's business, as that guy was just absolutely terrible for them. But that said, with this bunch, you just have a little bit of mixing and shaking right now with Southern Miss. They brought in a lot of non-Division I / junior college guys that have really been able to bump this team up to weeks. He's a guy that came up from the non-D1 ranks. He's been rock solid with 14 points, 5.5 boards. It is a Southern Miss team that's shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, but they still do leave a little bit of something to be desired there. I think that they're going to be solid down low. You bring in a guy like a Dejai Benoit, who was over at Alcorn St last season. He's been able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game. And Isaac Tavares, he has been absolutely tremendous. 20 points, 7.5 boards, 2.5 assists. Doesn't necessarily shoot it well from three-point range, but does really stir the drink for this team. But that said, with this Southern Miss team, just not a team that's really going to be really imposing with regards to their three-point shooting defense. So that's going to allow a lot of open looks for a UT Martin team that's got all sorts of versatility. You've got guys from like 12 different countries on this team, as they've been able to get a lot out of Andrzej Bukamirkovic, who's been able to give you 20.5 points, 8 boards. He's right now shooting 57% for three. As a whole, UT Martin is shooting over 37% from three-point range, with Filip Petrakovsky doing a nice job being able to dole out about 5.5 assists per game. And then you've got a guy that returns from a season ago in Afan Trinka, who's been able to do a pretty rock solid job, giving the team 6 points per contest. He's able to throw in there about 4 assists per game as well. So you've got multiple ball handlers. That's part of the reason why they've actually been turning the ball over so much. But this has also been a unit that's been able to do a nice job giving themselves second and third chances, as like pretty much everyone that sees minutes is between 6'6", 6'8". They're all able to bomb it from three-point range. You've got a lot of positionless basketball, and Dragos Langu has been really good in terms of supplying 15 points per contest. Comes on in from Romania, and he's been a nice mid-30s three-point shooter as well. So circumstance where at a 4 or less, 1 to lay with UT Martin, 5 or more taking the points with Southern Miss, and then 152 or less, like the over 153 or higher, the under, and that'll wrap things up for the Sunday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to mid-major Matt Josephs for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter / X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larry, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast with picks and analysis on every single game, every single day, so I'll be back to you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
Pacifico is a Mexican lager brewed to be discovered. It's like fresh tracks on a powder day. Like that uncharted trail a stone's throw away. Like the perfect wave on a sunny day. Pacifico. Find your own way. 21 plus. Drink responsibly. Imported by Crown Imports, Chicago, Illinois.
The Who's Down in Who Newville were making their list, but some didn't know Walmart has the best brands for their gifts.
What about toys? Do they have brands kids have been wanting all year?
Yep, Barbie, Tony's, and Lego. Gifts that will make them all cheer.
Do you mean they have all the brands I adore?
They have Nintendo, Nespresso, Apple, and more.
What about...
So the Who answered questions from friends till they were blue. Each one listened and shouted, from Walmart? Who knew? Shop gifts from top brands for everyone on your list in the Walmart app.
Extra value meals are back. That means 10 tender, juicy McNuggets and medium fries and a drink are just $8. Only at McDonald's.
For limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery.